At the airport parking lot, I found my son sleeping in his car with his twins. The windows were covered with old road maps and pages of the Chicago Tribune taped from the inside, and the air inside smelled of stale sweat and despair. I banged on the glass, and he woke up screaming, shielding his face as if he expected a blow. When he realized it was me, he rolled down the window, tears streaming down a face I barely recognized. I asked him, "Where is the $500,000 I invested in your startup?" He broke down and told me my wife and her family had taken everything and declared me mentally unstable. A rage rose in me I hadn't felt since my years in uniform. I told him to gather his things, because we were going to fix this starting right now. My name is Eugene Calloway. I'm 68 years old, and I gave 30 years of my life as a chief systems engineer for the Department of Defense. I constructed firewalls that the intelligence services of foreign nations couldn't crack. I raised my son, Andre, with that same iron discipline. I taught him that in this world, especially as a black man in America, your intellect is the only armor you carry, and your dignity is the only weapon worth wielding. I was certain I had prepared him for anything life could throw at him. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories, the place where truth, family, and justice meet. If stories like this one speak to you, I hope you'll stay with me and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Before we go further, I'd love to hear from you. What is it you're hoping to carry with you from a story like this? One strength perspective or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. I want to know. A note before we begin, some elements of this story have been shaped for dramatic storytelling, and any resemblance to specific real individuals or events is purely coincidental. It is the message beneath the story that matters. I was wrong. I had prepared him for enemies who come at you straight on, not for the ones who share your bed and beam at you over the dinner table. My flight had touched down at O'Hare International Airport 3 hours earlier. It was a humid Tuesday afternoon, the kind where heat rises off the asphalt in visible waves. I stood at the pickup curb with my 2 suitcases checking my watch. Andre was never late. Punctuality was the first real lesson I drilled into him the moment he learned to read a clock. He was supposed to pull up in his new BMW 7 Series, the car he'd bought after his company locked in its first major round of funding. That car was the emblem of everything he had built, proof that the $500,000 I'd placed in his hands my entire life, savings and the buyout from my patent, was paying off. 20 minutes went by, then 40. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. A knot of unease began cinching itself tight in my gut. This wasn't a parent's reflex fear of a highway accident. It was something older and deeper instinct sharpened across decades of threat assessment. I decided to walk to the long-term parking lot. Andre had mentioned once that he sometimes left his car there to save on fees when he had airport hotel meetings. It was a long shot, but I needed to move. I needed something other than standing in my suit letting the heat bake me into the pavement. The parking lot stretched out like a field of metal row after row as far as I could see. I worked my way through them, suitcases clattering across the uneven ground. Row G, row H, row. My eyes hunting for the sleek dark line of a BMW. Nothing. I was close to turning back to hail a cab and head to his place in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, when I saw it. Wedged into the far corner of the lot, half buried in the shadow of a concrete pillar, sat a rusted green Chevy Malibu. I stopped cold. I knew that car. It was the beater Andre had driven all through college. He was supposed to have unloaded it 5 years ago when his first paycheck cleared. What was it doing here? And why were the windows blanketed with old road maps and pages of the Chicago Tribune taped from the inside? I moved toward it slowly. The car had the look of something abandoned. A film of dust lay over the hood, and a parking ticket flapped under the wiper blade. But then I caught the condensation fogging the glass from within. Someone was breathing in there. I stepped closer and put my eye to a gap in the paper, my heart hammering hard against my sternum. Curled into each other in the back seat, limbs tangled, were my grandsons Noah and Miles, 5 years old. They had on dirty t-shirts, and Miles was clutching a half-eaten sleeve of graham crackers. In the driver's seat, slumped forward against the steering wheel, was Andre. He looked like a man hollowed out. His beard had grown wild, his shirt was stained, and he'd dropped at least 20 pounds since I last saw him at Christmas. This was not the CEO of a rising tech unicorn. This was a man in hiding. I let my suitcases fall. The sound cracked through the empty lot. I hammered on the driver's window with the flat of my palm. Andre jolted awake. His eyes flew open, raw animal terror in them. He threw both hands up, pressing himself against the door. "Please don't hurt them," he cried out, his voice muffled by the glass. "Please, I will sign the papers." "Andre!" I bellowed. "It's me. Open the door." He blinked his eyes, slowly finding focus. "Dad," he mouthed. He groped for the lock, his hand shaking so badly he missed it twice. The door finally groaned open. The smell reached me before anything else. Unwashed bodies, fast food wrappers, and fear. The stench of a cage. I reached in and pulled him out by the shoulder. He stumbled, his legs barely holding him. I kept him upright, this grown man, who once stood taller than me now, shaking like he might come apart. "What is this, Andre?" I demanded, my voice torn between fury and heartbreak. "Why are my grandsons sleeping in a car that reeks like a dumpster? Where is your house? Where is your car?" He stared at the ground, unable to look at me. "They are gone. Dad, all of it is gone." I tightened my grip on his shoulders. "Look at me. I gave you $500,000. That was not simply money, Andre. That was my blood. That was the patent money from the encryption algorithm I wrote in '95. "Where is it, Brianna?" he whispered. The name just hung there in the thick, humid air. Brianna and her parents. They triggered the mental health clause in the partnership agreement. I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "They have been drugging me, Dad." He sobbed, the dam finally giving way for months. I thought I was going out of my mind. I would black out during meetings. I would wake up screaming. I went to the doctor. She referred me to a friend of her father, Clifton. He diagnosed me with severe bipolar disorder and paranoia. Andre drew a ragged breath and wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Yesterday morning, I showed up at the office and the security codes had been changed. Clifton was waiting at the door with 2 guards. He had the paperwork ready. Because of my medical diagnosis, they declared me unfit to lead. They invoked the emergency power of attorney I'd signed when Brianna and I got married. Everything was transferred, the intellectual property, the bank accounts, all the assets into a holding company owned by the Hargrove family. And the house, I asked, my voice dropping to something dangerous. Restraining order. Brianna filed it yesterday, he said. She claimed I was a threat to her and the children. She threw me out. She locked down the joint accounts. I managed to get to the boys' school before she did, but we have no place to go. She reported the BMW stolen, so I had to ditch it and dig this wreck out of storage. I looked at my son. I looked at the brilliant engineer who'd graduated top of his class from MIT, now ground down to a fugitive in his own life by a family of predators who had seen him as nothing more than a source of wealth to be bled dry. The Hargrove family, Clifton and Nadine. I had never trusted them. Their smiles were too wide and too ready. Too many jokes about how articulate Andre was. They were the kind of people who believed the world belonged to them by birthright and that men like us were simply permitted on the premises to be useful. "You took the boys," I said. "That gives her grounds to push for a kidnapping charge." "She already has," Andre whispered. I did not shout. I did not rage. A cold calm moved through me like a current. The same calm I'd felt when I had to disarm a live explosive in Beirut in '83. Panic is a currency we cannot spend. I glanced into the back seat. Noah and Miles were stirring. Grandpa Noah said, rubbing his eyes. "Are we going home now?" "Yes," I told him, keeping my voice level. "But not the home, you know." I turned back to Andre. "Get the boys. Grab whatever clothes you have. Leave the car." "But," Dad, Andre said, faltering. "If we leave the car, we have nothing. We are flat broke." "You are not broke," I said, pulling out my wallet. "You are a Callaway, and you have me. I have my pension, and I have something Clifton Hargrove does not. I know how to build systems, and I know exactly how to tear them apart." Right then, Andre's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and the color drained from his face. He held the screen up so I could see. It was a text from Brianna. It read, "I know you are at the airport. You have 1 hour to bring the kids back and turn yourself into the nearest police station. If you don't, I will tell the press about your drug addiction. Daddy has already drafted the press release. Don't make this ugly, Andre. You know you can't win." I studied the screen. I memorized the number. I checked the timestamp. "She is tracking the phone," I said. Andre nodded, hands trembling again. "What do we do?" "She is going to destroy me, Dad. The company is about to IPO. If this story breaks, my reputation is gone for good." I took the phone from his hand. I looked at the sleek little device, the digital leash she was using to strangle my son's life. "Let her try," I said. I dropped the phone onto the concrete. It shattered with a clean, satisfying crack. Then I ground it under my heel until it was nothing but scattered glass and powder. "Get in my rental," I ordered. "We are going to a hotel cash, only no questions asked." "But Dad, the police." Andre started. "Let them come," I said, holding the door open for my grandsons. Clifton Hargrove thinks he is playing chess against a frightened boy. He has no idea he just pulled up a chair across from a grandmaster. He wants to talk about mental instability. Fine. I am going to show him precisely what a focused, angry black man can do. I got them into the rental. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the wreckage of Andre's former life sitting in that rusted Malibu, I glanced into the rearview mirror. The sun was going down, throwing long shadows across the city. The war had begun, and Brianna Hargrove had just made the first and final mistake of her life. She woke up the wrong father. As I merged into the grinding flow of the Kennedy Expressway, my eyes kept returning to the rearview mirror more than they stayed on the road. The rental smelled of fake lemon air freshener that did almost nothing to cover the ghost of stale cigarette smoke, but it was a sanctuary compared to that parking lot. Andre sat in the passenger seat with his head against the cool glass eyes, vacant and far away. In the back, Noah and Miles had finally surrendered to exhaustion and lay tangled together in a knot of limbs and seatbelts. I checked the mirror again. A black sedan sat 3 car lengths back, holding my speed exactly. When I shifted right, the sedan did the same. When I pushed the accelerator to clear a slow-moving truck, it closed the distance. No police markings, the grille had no hidden lights, and the suspension rode too soft. Private investigator. Brianna wasn't content to let the law do the hunting alone. She had paid eyes out here, chasing us down like animals. I said nothing to Andre about the tail. He was already wound so tight that one more blow might snap him entirely. Instead, I took the next exit without signaling, cutting sharply across 2 lanes at the last second. The sedan lurched to follow, but got swallowed up behind a honking delivery truck. I watched it bleed away in the distance, knowing it wouldn't be the last we'd see of them. Technology has made vanishing nearly impossible for an ordinary person, but I was not an ordinary person. We needed shelter, but a Marriott or a Hilton were never in consideration. Any hotel requiring a credit card or a license scan would fire an alert straight into the banking network Brianna controlled. We needed somewhere that existed in the margins. I drove for another hour away from the manicured suburbs and into the industrial grid of Cicero. I turned into the lot of the Lakeview Inn. The neon sign sputtered and flickered, half its letters burned to nothing. It was the kind of establishment where rooms went by the hour and nobody asked questions as long as the bills were clean. I nudged Andre awake. "We are here," I said. He took one look at the peeling paint and the figures hovering near the vending machine and drew back. "Dad, we cannot stay here. It is not safe." I met his eyes and said, "The only danger to us right now is a paper trail." I went into the office alone. The clerk behind the desk had grease stains on his shirt and didn't bother lifting his eyes from his small television. I set $200 in cash on the counter. 2 nights, I told him. No ID, no housekeeping. And if somebody comes around asking about a man traveling with 2 children, you never laid eyes on us. He swept the bills off the counter in one practiced motion and pushed a brass key across room 104 around the back. The room carried the scent of bleach and worn carpet, but the sheets passed inspection. I got the boys inside and locked up behind me, throwing the deadbolt in the chain. Then I pulled a wooden chair from the small table and wedged it firm under the doorknob. Andre watched with wide eyes. "Dad, is that really necessary?" he asked. I drew the curtains shut and pinned them together with a clip from my pocket, making sure no strip of light could escape to the outside. "Paranoia is just heightened situational awareness," I told him. I ordered fried chicken using a burner phone I'd picked up at a gas station on the way over. We ate without talking. The boys treated it like a camping trip, but Andre could barely get food down. Every distant siren made him flinch. We stacked the pillows so the boys could have the queen bed. Andre took the floor with a blanket, and I settled into the armchair with a clear line to the door. I didn't sleep. I sat there watching the shadows shift as the night wore on, my mind turning over the strategy. We needed an attorney, not just competent, but one with the spine to stand up to Hargrove money. I was working through my old contacts when the silence broke apart. 3 o'clock in the morning, and the pounding started. Not a knock, a heavy commanding thud that rattled the doorframe. "Police, open up." The shout was muffled by the thick wood, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. Andre lurched up from the floor, his face ash white. They found us. He breathed, his voice cracking apart. Oh God! Dad, they found us! I'm going to jail. He started moving toward the door, hands already rising. I stepped in front of him. Sit down, I said, voice low and hard. But Dad, they're the police, Andre said, tears breaking through. If we fight this, it only gets worse. Brianna said she would destroy me. She did it. It is over. I caught him by the collar and eased him back toward the corner away from the door. Nothing is over until I say it is over. Stay with the boys. Keep them calm. The hammering came again, harder. Open the door or we kick it in. I smoothed my jacket, checked my posture, and lifted the chair away from the knob. I undid the chain and turned the deadbolt. I opened the door just wide enough to fill the frame with my body. 2 uniformed officers stood in the harsh yellow light of the corridor. One had his hand resting on his holster. The motel clerk hovered behind them, looking pale and scared. Sir, we received a credible tip regarding a kidnapping in progress. The lead officer was young, 30 at most, with the look of a man eager to make an arrest. We have information that an Andre Calloway is holding 2 minors against their will at this location. Step aside. I didn't budge a centimeter. I didn't raise my voice. I fixed them with the same cold, measured stare I had spent 20 years perfecting in rooms full of generals. There is no kidnapping here, officer, I said evenly. My son is sleeping on the floor, and my grandsons are in that bed. What you have here is a family dispute, not a crime scene. The officer strained to see past me. We need to verify the children's welfare. We have a report that Mr. Calloway is mentally unstable and poses a danger. We have orders to take him in for psychiatric evaluation. Andre let out a quiet sound from the corner. The officer caught it and pressed forward. Sir, step aside now, or you will be placed under arrest for obstruction of justice. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. The second officer tensed and pulled his taser. I moved slowly and deliberately, drawing out a leather wallet. I opened it, not to a driver's license, but to a Department of Defense identification card, bearing a gold chip and a holographic seal. I also produced a small laminated card, listing my rank and security clearance. Officer, I said, dropping my voice a full octave so he had to lean in to catch it. My name is Eugene Calloway. I am a retired senior engineer for National Defense Systems. The man behind me is my son. Those children are my grandsons. Unless you are carrying a warrant signed by a judge that names this address and this specific room, you are not setting foot across this threshold. The young officer faltered. He looked at the credentials, then back at me. We don't need a warrant when exigent circumstances involving child safety are present, he said, but the certainty had gone out of him. There are no exigent circumstances, I returned firmly. The children are asleep in a bed. You are responding to a false report filed by a vindictive spouse who is currently under investigation for corporate fraud. If you enter this room without a warrant, you will be in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, and I will personally see to it that your captain and the city attorney spend the next 6 months buried in paperwork and civil rights litigation. Do you want to end your career tonight because a wealthy woman made a phone call? The hallway went quiet. The only sound was the vending machine humming at the far end of the corridor. The officer glanced at his partner, who gave a small shake of his head. They were used to handling drunks and low-level criminals, not composed men who knew constitutional law better than they did. We just need to confirm the children are breathing, the officer said, his tone dropping considerably. I stepped aside 6 inches, giving him a narrow line of sight to the bed, where Noah and Miles lay sleeping, without a care. He looked for a moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, the officer said, stepping back. We'll log that the subjects were located and appeared to be safe, but be advised, sir. If a judge signs off on a warrant, we will be back and we will not be asking this time. Understood, I said. Good night, officers. I shut the door and turned both locks. My legs felt weighted, but I kept that off my face. I turned around. Andre was staring at me with something between awe and bewilderment. He had never seen this version of his father. He knew the man who grilled burgers on Sunday afternoons, not the man who could hold his ground against armed officers. Get everything packed, I said, picking up my suitcase. 10 minutes and we are gone. But they just left. Andre said they are sitting in their car waiting for orders. I told him the moment they report our location to Brianna, she will not send police the next time around. She will send something far worse. We move now. While we gathered our things, I peered out through the narrow gap in the curtains. The cruiser was still in the lot, the officer leaning into his radio. I had won the skirmish, but the war had just shifted to a higher level. We were no longer just running from a broken marriage. We were running from an apparatus built to accept the lie so long as the right people were telling it. I looked at my grandsons sleeping with the total innocence of children who didn't yet know what was being done to them, and I made a quiet vow to myself. I would dismantle that apparatus down to its foundation, if that was what it required. "Let's move," I whispered, and we disappeared into the night before the sirens could find us again. The iron gates of the Hargrove estate loomed over me like the entrance to a fortress raised on blood money. I left my rental on the road's shoulder. I knew they would not buzz open for a vehicle registered to a nobody. I straightened my jacket, checked my tie in the side mirror, and started up the long driveway on foot. The sun pressed down hard on the back of my neck, a reminder that I was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but my mind. I reached the security booth. The man inside I recognized at once, Drucker. 5 years back, I had written him a recommendation letter when he applied for his private security license. He used to call me sir and tell me he appreciated my service. Drucker looked up from his monitors. His eyes registered recognition for just a fraction of a second, then a mask of professional indifference locked into place. He came out of the booth with one hand resting easy on his taser. "State your business," he said, voice stripped flat. I looked straight at him and said, "I am here to collect the personal belongings of my grandsons and my son. Tell Clifton I am not leaving without them." Drucker did not flinch. He told me to turn around and put my hands on the hood of his patrol vehicle. A flush of heat moved through my chest. I asked if that was truly necessary. He said protocol applies to all unidentified visitors. I turned and placed my hands on the hot metal. I let a man who once came to me for career advice run his hands over me like I was a common criminal. He worked through my pockets, my ankles, my waist. He took my phone and my wallet, turning them over like contraband. He wasn't searching for weapons. He was hunting for recording devices. He was stripping my dignity one layer at a time, hoping I'd snap, give him a reason to reach for that taser. I gave him nothing. I stood like stone. When he finished, he tossed my wallet back to me. He pressed a button on his remote, and the heavy gates groaned apart. "He told me to walk," said Mr. Hargrove was expecting me on the front lawn. I went past him without a syllable, but I caught the flicker of shame in his eyes. He was a pawn, and I don't spend energy on pawns. The driveway was a quarter-mile of crushed white stone that cracked and crunched under every step. It was engineered to make anyone approaching on foot feel exposed and diminished. At the crown of the hill stood the mansion, a sprawling colonial monstrosity dressed in white pillars and sculpted hedges. Waiting on the porch, turning a glass of amber liquid in the afternoon light, was Clifton Hargrove. He had on a seersucker suit that probably cost more than my car. He stood there watching me climb the full length of that hill, sipping at his ease, relishing the sight of Eugene Calloway, the retired engineer, sweating his way up to beg. When I reached the foot of the porch steps, I stopped. My breathing was labored, but my posture stayed straight. Clifton did not offer water. He did not offer a chair. He swirled the ice in his glass and showed me that tight, superior smile that never once made it to his eyes. He said, "Eugene, you look exhausted. A man your age shouldn't be out walking in this kind of heat." I set his false concern aside. I told him I wanted the boys' clothes, their things, and Andre's personal computer. Clifton laughed softly, a dry, humorless sound. He stepped down one stair, closing part of the distance between us while keeping the elevation advantage. He told me I had a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world operates. He said Andre does not own anything anymore. The computer belongs to the company. The clothes were purchased from the joint account, which is frozen pending the investigation into Andre's financial misconduct. I looked him in the eye and asked how he sleeps at night, knowing he set up a man who once regarded him as a father figure. Clifton sighed, wearing his boredom like a badge. He told me I was being dramatic, said Andre is a gifted coder, certainly, but not a leader. He said, "Men like Andre, and by extension, men like you, are strong with the mechanics of things. You follow instructions well. You build what you're told to build. But you don't have the pedigree to manage real wealth. You don't have the instincts to sit at the table that matters." He leaned in, and I caught the expensive bourbon on his breath. He said he did what had to be done to protect the company. He claimed Andre was unstable, emotional, unpredictable, said he was actually doing Andre a kindness by relieving him of the weight of leadership. He called it a business correction. He said, "Our investors, people from established families with real capital, were growing uncomfortable watching a kid from the inner city try to run a $50 million corporation. They needed stability. They needed a face they could believe in. "And be honest with yourself," Eugene Clifton said, pulling his voice down to something almost conspiratorial. "Andre doesn't have the right face for a billion-dollar IPO." I drove my fingernails into my palms until they bit. This had nothing to do with mental health. It had nothing to do with business. This was a pack of entitled predators who believed our genius existed to be mined for their benefit. They had used my son as the engine to build their empire, but they were never going to let him anywhere near the controls. I looked at Clifton and told him plainly that he was a thief and a liar. I told him he had made a serious error in underestimating us. Clifton just laughed again. He finished his drink, turned his back on me, and raised one hand in a dismissive wave toward the side of the house near the garage. He said the housekeeper had set some bags out by the curb. He said I was welcome to whatever garbage was there, but if I ever crossed onto his property again, he would have Drucker put me down for trespassing. He went back through the heavy oak door and pulled it shut, leaving me alone in the heat. I walked to the side of the house. There, heaped next to the overflowing recycling bins, were 6 black garbage bags tossed out carelessly, some of them already torn open by raccoons or stray cats. I went down on one knee on the hot pavement. I could feel the heat radiating straight through my trousers. I began working at the knots with both hands shaking not from age, but from a cold and exacting fury. The first bag held Noah's clothes. Noah's favorite rocket ship pajamas were stained with coffee grounds. Someone had deliberately poured waste into the bag. I shook them out, cleaned them off as best I could, and folded them with care. The next bag held Miles's stuffed animals. The teddy bear I'd bought him the day he was born was in there, its head torn clean off. This was not disposal. This was violence. It was a message aimed directly at my grandsons. I moved to the third bag. It was heavier than the rest. I tore it open and found a tangle of electronics cables, old keyboards, cracked monitors. This was Andre's parts drawer, the components he hoarded for repairs. I worked my fingers through the knot of wires. They brushed against something hard and metallic near the bottom. I pulled it free. An external hard drive. The casing was destroyed, looked like someone had gone at it with a hammer. The plastic shell hung by threads and the metal platter inside sat exposed to the open air. Clifton Hargrove had seen a ruined piece of junk. He saw refuse. He believed that by shattering the casing he had erased whatever was inside. He was a man of finance, a man of surfaces. He did not understand how technology actually works. He did not know that the platters inside a server-grade drive are built from glass and ceramic composites engineered to endure extreme conditions. I turned the drive over slowly. The connection port was bent badly, but the disk itself appeared intact. I recalled Andre telling me years back that he kept a local backup of his raw code, the original kernel we had designed, together on a standalone drive that never once touched the cloud. I looked up at the house. Brianna's silhouette was visible in an upstairs window watching me. She probably savored the sight of her father-in-law on his knees in the garbage. She thought she had taken everything from us. She thought it was over. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my trousers. I put the broken hard drive into my jacket pocket right against my chest. It sat there like a loaded weapon. I bundled the bags of clothes over my shoulder and started back down the long white driveway. The crunch of the crushed stone sounded different on the way out. It no longer sounded like submission. It sounded like a clock ticking down. Clifton Hargrove had made a fatal miscalculation. He had judged the book by its cover, and he had judged the machine by its casing. He had discarded the one thing in the world that could bring him down, and he had personally handed me an invitation to come and collect it. I reached the gate, and Drucker buzzed it open without meeting my eyes. I walked through not as a broken old man, but as a soldier who had just recovered the nuclear codes. The war was on. We spent 3 days in the shadow of that motel room, watching the outside world shred my son's reputation through the glow of a laptop screen. The Hargrove family did not simply steal Andre's company. They launched a scorched earth campaign to make certain he could never come back. Every morning delivered a fresh headline, each one more savage than the one before. Tech prodigy melts down. Founder of Neuropath accused of embezzlement to fund drug habit. Sources say Andre Calloway was unstable for months. These were not just lies. They were precision-crafted narratives designed to strip him of his humanity. They took photographs of him looking hollowed out from 18-hour workdays and offered them as proof of addiction. They reframed his obsessive dedication to his code as manic behavior. Andre sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through comment sections, a form of self-inflicted damage I kept trying to pull him away from. Strangers who had never been in the same room with him were calling him a disgrace and a junkie. But the knife went in deepest when he opened the financial news. The valuation of his company now, under Clifton Hargrove's sole control, had climbed 20% in 48 hours. The market was celebrating his destruction. Wall Street was delighted by the narrative the erratic black founder removed, replaced by the steady hand of old money. Andre hurled the laptop across the room. "They are erasing me, Dad!" he screamed, his voice breaking apart. "They are getting richer off my absence." I looked at the cracked screen and then at my son. I told him this is precisely what they want. They want you to shatter. They want you screaming inside four walls where nobody can hear you. But we are not going to scream. We are going to listen. I left the boys with Andre and drove out to a diner on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like scorched rubber and everyone keeps their eyes on their own business. I went to the rear booth where a man was already seated. Virgil was a former Navy intelligence officer who now ran a private investigation firm that handled the problems law enforcement wouldn't go near. We had served together in the Gulf. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He just slid a manila envelope across the sticky table. "You are not going to like what's in here, Eugene," he said. I opened it. Inside were dozens of high-resolution photographs taken over the preceding 2 weeks. The first several showed Brianna out shopping. She was walking out of Cartier on the Magnificent Mile, swinging a bag that likely cost more than my car. She was smiling. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had already won, but the dates on the photographs were damning. She was purchasing diamond earrings on the very same day she claimed Andre was terrorizing her and the children. She was eating lunch at Le Bernardin, while Andre was supposedly in the grip of a psychotic break. The picture of the frightened, abused wife dissolved with every glossy print, but the real weapon was in the second stack. Virgil had followed her to a boutique hotel in River North. She had not gone alone. In the photograph, she was with a man. They were holding hands in the lobby. They were kissing in the elevator. I knew the man immediately. Nathan Wexler. He was the chief financial officer of the venture capital firm that was preparing to acquire Andre's company. The pieces hit the board all at once with the force of a sledgehammer. This was not a family dispute. This was corporate espionage dressed up as a divorce. Brianna was sleeping with the man who controlled the acquisition money. They had conspired together to push Andre out, drive down the purchase price, and divide the proceeds between them. Wexler would get the company for a fraction of its worth, and Brianna would walk away with the divorce settlement and the freedom to be with her lover. It was a coup d'etat fueled by lust and greed. A cold fury settled deep in my gut. They had dismantled my son's entire life for a weekend in River North and a seat on the board. Virgil watched me steadily from across the table. "Do you want me to leak these to the press?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said, pressing the envelope shut. "Information is ammunition, Virgil. You do not fire until you can see the whites of their eyes." I returned to the motel with the envelope tucked under my arm. Andre was wearing a path in the carpet, the walls of the small room pressing in around him. When I laid the photographs out in front of him, I expected tears. I expected him to fold. I did not expect the rage. He looked at the image of his wife kissing Wexler, and something fundamental inside him fractured. A sound tore out of him, guttural, half animal, half something mechanical, snapping under pressure. He snatched his car keys off the dresser. "I am going to kill him," he roared. "I am going to find him and beat him to death with my hands." He drove himself toward the door. He was 32 years old and in peak condition, but blind fury makes a man sloppy. I moved to block the exit. "Move, Dad!" he shouted, his eyes wild and red. "Get out of my way." "No," I said, holding the frame. He tried to force past me, putting enough into it that I rocked back against the door frame. I caught his wrist and used his own momentum to spin him and pin him against the wall. A move I hadn't called on in 20 years, but the body remembers what the mind forgets. "Let me go," he screamed, thrashing against my hold. "They took my company. They took my wife. They took my whole life. I have to do something." "You are going to do nothing," I said. Back my voice raised my face close to his. "If you walk out that door right now, you hand them everything they need. You become the dangerous, unhinged man they told the world you were. You will end up in a cell, and your boys will be raised by that woman and that man. Is that what you want? And Andre stopped fighting. He went slack against the wall, chest heaving. He slid down to the floor and buried his face in both hands. But it hurts, Dad. He sobbed. It hurts so much. I want them to pay. They will pay, I said, letting him go and dropping down to his level. But they will pay on our terms. Listen to me, son. Rage is a powerful fuel, but a reckless driver. Holding on to this anger and acting on it now is like swallowing poison and expecting someone else to suffer. You have to purge the poison. We are not going to defeat them with our fists. We are going to defeat them with the truth. And we are going to wait until they are so drunk on their own triumph that they never see the blade coming. I pulled him into a hug, holding him as he wept, the bitter tears of a man stripped of his innocence. I looked over his shoulder at the sleeping boys. We were in a cold war now, and in a cold war it is not the one who strikes first who wins, it is the one who strikes last. We would wait, we would watch, and when the moment came, we would bring their entire world down in ruins. The grand ballroom of the Blackstone Hotel smelled of white lilies and old money. It was the annual gala for the Children's Hope Foundation, a charity the Hargrove family used to polish their reputation. I stood at the entrance in my navy suit, bought for a retirement ceremony 10 years ago, slightly too loose around the shoulders, now the fabric long since stripped of its sheen. Around me, men in tuxedos that cost more than my annual pension were laughing and slapping each other on the back. Women in silk gowns floated across the marble floor, like swans on a gilded lake. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the soldier's instinct to square my shoulders and stand at full height. But tonight, I could not be a soldier. Tonight, I had to be a casualty. I let my shoulders fall forward. I loosened the muscles in my face, letting the exhaustion of the past week drag my features down. I shuffled slightly as I walked, building the gait of a man whom life had already defeated. The security guard at the door examined my invitation with suspicion. It was a pity invite sent weeks ago before the war began, meant to show how gracious the Hargroves were. He looked me up and down his lip, curling just slightly but waved me through. The moment I crossed into the room, the noise seemed to thin. Heads turned, whispers moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. They knew who I was. I was the father of the disgrace. I was the father of the addict who had tried to bring down the great Clifton Hargrove. I could see it in their eyes, not empathy, but a morbid fascination, the same way people slow down to stare at a wreck on the highway. A woman whispered loudly to her husband nearby, "That is him. That is the father. He looks terrible." I kept my head down, turning my hat over and over in my hands like a man with nowhere left to go. I needed them to see a broken man. I needed them to see someone with no fight remaining. If they caught even a flicker of defiance, the trap would collapse. I moved toward the center of the room, where a large ice sculpture of an eagle was melting slowly under the chandeliers. Clifton and Brianna were holding court near the open bar. Clifton looked flushed and triumphant, a crystal tumbler of scotch in hand. Brianna wore a red dress that looked like a wound against her pale skin. She was laughing at something the mayor was saying, her hand resting possessively on Clifton's arm. When they saw me, the laughter stopped. The circle of sycophants parted, leaving me standing alone in the opening. The silence that settled over that corner of the room was heavy and suffocating. Clifton smiled, but it was a smile showing too many teeth. "Well, look who decided to join us," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the music. "Eugene Calloway. We did not think you would have the nerve to show your face here after what your son did." I took a step forward, my hands trembling. The trembling was theater, but the nausea was entirely real. "Mr. Hargrove!" I said, my voice thin and raspy. "Please, I need to speak with you." "Speak then," Clifton said, spreading his arms wide. "We are all friends here. We have nothing to hide." I surveyed the faces of the city's elite surrounding us. They were waiting for the show. I swallowed my pride. It tasted like ash. "It is about Andre," I said, dropping my eyes to the floor. "He is in a bad way. The withdrawal is severe. We are living in a motel. I have run out of money for his medication. I have run out of money to feed the boys." Brianna stepped forward. She swirled her wineglass, watching me with cold amusement. "And whose fault is that?" "Eugene," she asked. "We offered him help. We offered him the finest facility in the state, but you took him. You chose this path." I know, I said, letting my voice break. I know I was wrong. I believed I could manage it, but I cannot. He is sick. He needs proper help. I am just an old man living on a pension. I cannot fight anymore. A murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. See, they were thinking. The Hargroves were right all along. The son is an addict and the father is out of his depth. Clifton took a slow sip of his drink, savoring the moment. He was the benevolent king, and I was the peasant at his gate. So, what is it you want, Eugene? Do you want us to take him back? No, I said quickly. He is too ashamed. He just needs a private clinic upstate, but they require a deposit $10,000. Please, Clifton, for the sake of the grandchildren, help us this one time and we will disappear. We will never trouble you again. Clifton looked at Brianna. They traded a glance of pure predatory satisfaction. This was exactly what they had wanted. Total surrender. Clifton reached into his jacket and produced a checkbook. The only sound in the room was the uncapping of his fountain pen. $10,000, he said, inscribing the figures with a flourish. That is a great deal of money for a mistake, Eugene. But we are a charitable family. We believe in mercy even for those who bite the hand that feeds them. He tore the check free but did not pass it to me. He held it between two fingers just beyond my reach. But there is a condition, Clifton said. Anything I said, extending my hand. Clifton drew the check back. We need to be certain this money goes toward treatment and not back into a vein. And we need to protect our company from any future disruptions. If you acknowledge that Andre is unwell, then we can help him. Brianna reached into her purse and produced a folded document. She had brought it with her. They had planned for this. Or perhaps they carried it everywhere waiting for exactly this moment. Sign this, she said, pressing the paper toward me. It is an affidavit. It states that you as his father have personally witnessed his erratic behavior and drug use. It confirms that he was mentally incapacitated when he raised questions about the transfer of company assets. Sign it and the money is yours. I looked at the document. The language was dense, but the meaning was unmistakable. By putting my name on this, I would be legally destroying my son's credibility for good. I would be ratifying their theft. I would be handing them the shield they needed to survive the IPO. I hesitated. I looked at the check trembling between Clifton's fingers. I looked at Brianna's expectant face. I looked at the crowd judging me in silence. Please, I whispered. Do I have to? If you want to save his life, you do. Clifton said, his voice like ice. Bow to the truth, Eugene. Admit that you failed him. I felt a fire rising in my gut, hot enough to burn through my shirt, but I smothered it with cold. I slowly accepted the pen from Clifton. My hand shook badly as I brought the tip down to the paper. I felt every set of eyes in the room on my back. I was selling my son. That is what they believed. I signed Eugene David Calloway. The ink was black and permanent. Brianna snatched the paper before it had even dried. She studied the signature, measuring it against her memory of my handwriting. She smiled a genuine smile of victory. Finally, she said, tucking the document safely into her clutch beside her lipstick. You finally did the right thing, Eugene. Clifton flicked the check at me. It fluttered down to the floor near my shoe. He had not handed it to me. He made me bend to retrieve it. Use it wisely, he said, turning back to the mayor, and get that boy some help. I crouched down, my knees cracking. I picked up the slip of paper that embodied their arrogance. $10,000 to buy a $50 million lie. I folded it and placed it in my pocket. Thank you, I murmured. Thank you for your generosity. I turned and walked away. The crowd opened for me again, but the whispers had changed. They were dismissive now. I was no longer a threat. I was a tragedy, a pitiful footnote in the Hargrove success story. I walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, past the doorman who looked straight through me as though I were made of air. I pushed through the revolving doors and out into the cool night city. Traffic noise hit me loud and chaotic, but to my ears it sounded like music. I rounded the corner into the shadows of an alleyway where the streetlights didn't reach. I stopped. I straightened up. The slump evaporated from my shoulders. The trembling left my hands. I drew a long breath, pulling the gritty city air deep into my lungs. I reached into my pocket and brought out the check. I studied Clifton's signature. Then I took out my phone and called Virgil. Did you get it? Virgil asked. I got it, I said, my voice level and hard as iron. I have the check and the affidavit. They have it, I said. They are probably raising a glass to it right now. Good. Virgil said that check is proof of payment, a bribe tied to the date on the affidavit. It proves they coerced a witness. And because they drew from the company account to write a personal check and silence a whistleblower, they had just committed felony embezzlement and witness tampering. I know, I said. I looked up at the Blackstone Hotel, at the windows burning gold where the vultures were feasting on their victory. They believed they had broken me. They believed they had purchased my silence. What they did not understand was that I had handed them a rope and watched them fashion the noose themselves. "Go home, Virgil," I said. "Get the files ready. Tonight we sleep. Tomorrow we tighten the knot." I put the phone away and headed down the street. I did not shuffle. I marched. The check in my pocket felt heavy, not with shame, with justice. And justice was bearing down on them faster than they could ever dream. The bathroom of the Lakeview Inn had become our command center. I had cranked the shower to full heat and let the room fill with steam for 20 minutes to settle the dust particles in the air. We could not afford a professional clean room, so this rough substitute would have to do. I sat on the closed toilet lid with a dust mask over my face, a row of precision torque screwdrivers lined up along the edge of the sink. The hard drive I had salvaged from the trash heap at the Hargrove estate rested on a folded towel. It looked like a casualty of war. The casing was cracked and the interface pins were bent, but the weight of it felt promising. Andre stood in the doorway watching me with the focus of a bomb disposal tech. He held a flashlight steady, the beam falling across the exposed platters as I carefully freed the retention bracket. One slip and the read-write head would score the magnetic surface, erasing the only evidence we had left. I worked without speaking. These hands had once rewired guidance systems for cruise missiles. Now they were fighting to save my family. I lifted out the damaged actuator arm, bent at a 45-degree angle, testament to the force Clifton had used when he destroyed it. I swapped it for a donor arm pulled from an old laptop drive I'd picked up at a pawn shop that morning. It was Frankenstein surgery. I connected the drive to our laptop through a SATA to USB bridge. I looked at Andre and gave a single nod. "Plug it in," I said. He pressed the connector into the port. We held our breath. The drive responded. It clicked once, then twice. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then came the sound, a high-pitched whine that sounded like victory, the platters spinning up to speed. The laptop screen flickered. A folder icon appeared. We were in. Andre exhaled a breath that came out almost like a sob. "It is all there," he whispered, moving through the directory. Every line of code, every version history, the complete neural network architecture. He turned to me with wet eyes. "We can prove I wrote it, Dad. We can prove the intellectual property belongs to me, and not the holding company." I watched the lines of code scroll across the screen like green rain. I reached out and stilled his hand. "No, Andre," I said. "We are not going to prove you wrote it. We are going to prove I did." Andre looked at me, lost. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, I wrote this. You showed me the basics, but this architecture is mine." I shook my head slowly. "Open the kernel file," I said. "Go to line 001. He hesitated, then did what I asked. The screen filled with a block of hexadecimal code that looked like pure noise to anyone without the key. "Decrypt it," I said, using the RSA key I gave you for your very first email account. Andre's fingers moved fast across the keyboard. The noise dissolved, and a plain text message surfaced embedded in the deepest foundation of the software. It read, "Property of Eugene D. Callaway Department of Defense, Project Black Box, dated 1997. Andre stared at the screen jaw slack. "I do not understand," he said. I leaned back against the cool porcelain of the sink. "The core algorithm you built on the one that enables the AI to learn from medical data without violating privacy protocols is derived from a project I shut down 20 years ago. I explained I handed you the framework when you launched your company, because I knew it would work for healthcare, but I never legally transferred the patent to you. Under the law, that code is classified government technology, and I retain the rights to adapt it for civilian use." The weight of that hit Andre like something physical. "That means," he started, "that means Brianna did not just steal your company," I said, completing it for him. "She stole federal property licensed to me. This is no longer a civil dispute over marital assets. This is intellectual property theft from a third party, and that third party is me. I own the foundation their entire empire is built on, and I can yank it out from under them whenever I decide to." We were sitting in that quiet triumph, absorbing the shift in power, when a scream from the other room tore through everything. A sharp, piercing shriek of terror. We burst into the bedroom. Noah was convulsing on the bed, his small body arching violently. His eyes had rolled back, and foam had gathered at the corners of his mouth. Miles was in the corner, crying, arms wrapped around himself. I pressed my hand to Noah's forehead. He was on fire, a febrile seizure, a temperature spike. We had been locked so deep in the code that we had missed every sign of the flu that had been brewing in the damp motel air. "We have to get him to the hospital," Andre yelled, pulling his son into his arms. I grabbed the car keys, then stopped dead. "If we walk into a hospital, they will run his name," I said. "Brianna has flagged their social security numbers. The moment we check in the system, we'll ping the police and her lawyers. They will claim we are neglecting them. They will take them." Andre looked at his convulsing child. Then he looked at me. His face was nothing but raw agony. "I do not care," he shouted, already moving for the door. "Let them arrest me. I am not letting my son die." I ran after him. We ran red lights, the rental car's tires screaming on the pavement. Noah had stopped seizing, but was limp, his breathing shallow. I rode in the back, cooling him with a wet towel and whispering at him to stay with us. When we pulled up to the emergency entrance of Advocate, Illinois Masonic Medical Center, I made a call. "Keep the engine running," I told Andre. "Pull your hoodie up over your face. I will take him inside." I carried my grandson through the harsh fluorescent light of the ER. The triage nurse took one look at the limp boy in my arms and moved us straight back past the registration desk. Doctors converged around us. They got Noah on monitors. They gave him something to bring the fever down. I stood in the corner and watched the heart rate monitor find its rhythm. My own heart was running harder than any machine in that room. A nurse carrying a clipboard came toward me. "Sir, we need the patient's information for our records," she said. "Pen ready." I glanced at her name tag. "Sarah." "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice low and urgent. "My wallet is in the car. My son is parking it. He will be in shortly." She studied me with a skeptical look. "Okay, but I need a name," she insisted. I hesitated. Give the real name and the digital tripwires would snap. Give a fake name and get caught, that was fraud. Just then, two uniformed officers strolled through the ER entrance. They were laughing, coffees in hand, but their presence landed on me like a thunderclap. They moved toward the reception desk. I watched the receptionist gesture toward the triage area. She was pointing at me. She had either recognized us from the news or someone had run the plate. I looked at Noah. He was sleeping quietly now the crisis passed. I looked at the red glow of the exit sign down the hall. I leaned over and kissed my grandson on the forehead. "I am sorry, little man," I whispered. I stepped over to the nurse. "I am going to grab the insurance card from the car," I said. Before she could respond, I turned and walked calmly toward the main doors. The moment I cleared her line of sight, I broke into a run for the side exit. I sprinted to where Andre was sitting with the engine idling. "Go," I said, throwing myself in. "Drive now." Andre looked at the empty back seat. "Where is Noah?" he asked, his voice climbing with panic. "He is safe," I said, clicking my seatbelt. "The doctors have him. He is stable, but the police are inside. If we had stayed, we would both be in cuffs, and Miles would have gone straight to foster care. We have to leave him, Andre." "No." Andre's hands locked on the steering wheel, his voice cracking. "I cannot leave him there alone." "He is not alone," I said, gripping his arm. "He is inside a hospital. They will contact Brianna. She will come and take him back to the mansion." Andre slammed his palm against the dashboard, his whole body shaking. "You made me abandon my son. I saved your son," I said, keeping my voice hard to cover the thing breaking inside me. "Now you have to save yourself so we can get him back. Drive." We tore out of the lot just as the officers burst through the emergency room doors behind us. We disappeared into the flow of city traffic, leaving a piece of ourselves behind. The war had claimed its first hostage, and now this was no longer about money or code. It was about blood. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. It was a windowless box built to drain hope and replace it with procedure. I sat in the back row in my same navy suit, while Andre sat alone at the defendant's table. His shoulders were curled inward as though he were trying to fold himself down into the wood and vanish. Across the aisle, the Hargrove family looked like a portrait of American royalty. Brianna wore a modest navy dress and a strand of pearls that broadcast conservative values and maternal grace. Clifton sat beside her, murmuring into the ear of their attorney, a man named Crenshaw, known for dismantling lives with a pleasant smile. Judge Tremont swept into the room in a billow of black robes. He was a man who played golf at the same club where Clifton held a platinum membership. I had watched them clasping hands in the hallway before the session opened. I knew then that justice's scales were not merely blind. They were rigged. Crenshaw rose to deliver his opening argument. No shouting, no pacing. He spoke with the settled calm of a man who already knows how the verdict reads. He painted a portrait of Andre that was completely unrecognizable. A man eaten by paranoia, dependent on narcotics, and given to violent outbursts. He described the hospital incident, Andre fleeing with a sick child, endangering the life of a minor. Then he delivered the kill shot. Crenshaw crossed to the evidence table and lifted a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth as oiled wood. "The defense contends that Mr. Calloway is a devoted father who is being unfairly targeted. But we have here a sworn affidavit from the person who knows him better than anyone, his own father, Mr. Eugene Calloway." I watched Andre's spine stiffen. He turned slowly in his chair. His eyes found mine across the room. There was no anger in them, only a deep, shattering sadness. He looked at me the way a man looks at the sky while his house burns behind him. He did not know. I had not told him about the strategy because his reaction had to be real. If he had known it was a trap, he would have looked guilty. But now, watching his face collapse, I felt something in my chest sharper than any bullet I had ever caught. Crenshaw read the document aloud. "I, Eugene Calloway, hereby attest that my son, Andre Calloway, has exhibited signs of mental instability and drug dependency. I accept the financial assistance of the Hargrove family to secure his treatment." Each word was a nail driven into Andre's coffin. The courtroom held its breath. Even the court reporter seemed to pause her fingers. Andre turned back to face the front. He lowered his head into his hands. He had surrendered. He believed he was standing entirely alone. Brianna pressed a tissue to her dry eyes, the picture of a suffering wife who had exhausted every option trying to save her husband. Judge Tremont peered over his spectacles at Andre. "Mr. Calloway," he said, his tone soaked in condescension. "Given this evidence and the sworn testimony of your own father, I see little reason to extend these proceedings. The court's obligation is to the safety of the children. It is plain that you are not presently able to provide a stable home." The air in the room thickened. It felt like sinking underwater. The judge began shuffling his papers, readying himself to deliver the final blow. He was going to award full permanent custody to Brianna. He was going to issue a permanent restraining order. He was going to cut Andre out of his son's lives entirely. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. It was time. I stood up. My chair scraped hard against the floor. The sound cracked through the silence like a shot. "Your Honor," I said, projecting from the diaphragm the way I had once called troops to order on the parade deck, "I would like to submit a supplement to that affidavit." Judge Tremont looked up irritated. "Sit down, Mr. Calloway," he snapped. "You are an observer, not a party to these proceedings. Your statement has already been entered." "It has not, Your Honor," I said, stepping into the aisle. That statement was incomplete. It was signed under duress, and it was signed as part of an investigation into the fitness of the mother, not the father. "Objection!" Crenshaw barked, rising to his feet. "This is highly irregular. The witness is disrupting the court." I moved toward the bench, ignoring the bailiff angling to cut me off. I held up a small black flash drive. "This evidence bears directly on the immediate physical and emotional safety of the minors, Noah and Miles Calloway," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the judge. "If you rule without reviewing this, you will be knowingly placing 2 children in the custody of an abuser, and I will ensure the appellate court is aware that you refuse to examine the evidence." The word abuser hung in the air like smoke. Brianna's breath caught audibly. Clifton's face flooded a deep, furious purple. The judge wavered. He glanced at the bailiff, then back at me. He saw a man who was not intimidated by him. He saw a man who knew the law better than he did. "Approach the bench," Tremont said at last, with a grunt. I walked past Andre. I did not look at him. I could not yet face the confusion in his eyes. I handed the drive to the clerk. "Play the file dated October 14th, I said. The clerk plugged it into the court system. The large wall screens flickered on. The footage was grainy at first, captured by a button camera I had sewn into Noah's teddy bear months before any of this began, because I had sensed something was wrong long before I could name it. The image sharpened. The nursery of the Hargrove mansion. Brianna was there. No pearls this time, a silk robe, and a glass of wine in her hand. Noah and Miles were sitting on the floor in tears. They had spilled some juice on the white carpet. The audio was clean and clear. "Shut up!" Brianna screamed. Her face had twisted into something unrecognizable. "You stupid little brats. Look at what you did to my carpet. Do you know what this cost? She kicked the toys across the room. Noah flinched. I hate you, Noah cried. I want my daddy. Your daddy is a loser, Brianna hissed, standing over the 5-year-old. And you are going to be a loser, just like him. I wish I never had you. You ruined my body, and now you are ruining my house. If you do not stop crying, I will lock you in the basement again. What is about to unfold in this story shook me when I first sat with it, because it forces you to ask how far loyalty can be pushed before it becomes a liability. So, let me ask you this. If you discovered that someone close to you had been quietly working against you, would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you wait and build your case in silence? Do you hear me? The video cut to another clip. Brianna was on the phone ignoring Miles, who was tugging at her robe and begging for food. She shoved him away hard enough that he fell and struck his head against the table. She never even glanced down. She just kept talking about her spa appointment. The courtroom had gone deadly silent, the silence of a tomb. I turned to look at Brianna. Every drop of color had left her face. She looked like a wax figure beginning to soften and collapse. She clutched the table-edge knuckles bone white. Clifton was staring at the screen, mouth slightly open. He had known his daughter was spoiled, but he had not known she was a monster. Or perhaps he had known and simply chosen not to care. I turned back to face the judge. The video ended. The screen went dark, but the echo of her voice seemed to vibrate in the walls long after. That is the mother you are about to award custody to, Your Honor, I said quietly. That is the woman who claims my son is the danger. Judge Tremont removed his glasses. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. He looked over at Crenshaw, who was frantically sifting through papers, hunting for a defense that did not exist. There is no defense for cruelty, Mr. Crenshaw, the judge said, his voice low and cutting. Do you have any explanation for what we just witnessed? Your Honor, Crenshaw stammered. The context of that footage is unclear. It could have been edited. It could be. Save it. Tremont snapped. He turned his gaze on Brianna with open disgust. Mrs. Hargrove, you will surrender your passport immediately. The court is ordering an emergency evaluation of your home environment. But, Your Honor, Crenshaw started. Silence. The judge thundered, his gavel cracking down. The custody ruling is suspended. Temporary custody of the minors is granted to the father, Mr. Andre Calloway, effective immediately pending a full investigation. The children are to be transferred to him within the hour. Andre made a sound that was equal parts laugh and sob. He dropped forward, forehead touching the table, his whole body trembling. I walked back to him. I placed my hand on his shoulder. He lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were wet. You knew, he whispered. You knew the whole time. I told you, I said, keeping my hand firm on his shoulder. We do not fight with fists. We fight with the truth. Brianna was screaming now, shouting that it was a setup, that the video had been doctored, but the bailiff was already steering her toward the exit. Clifton had risen to his feet, glaring at me with a hatred that radiated like heat. He leveled a shaking finger across the room. You will regret this, Eugene, he spat. You think this is finished, I will bury you. I held his gaze without blinking. I straightened my tie. Mr. Hargrove, I said, my voice flat and cold. Bring a shovel. You are going to need it to dig your own grave. I helped Andre to his feet. We walked out of that courtroom side by side. We did not look back. We had won the battle for the boys, but the war for the company, the war for our name, was only now entering its most dangerous chapter. Clifton was wounded, and a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind, but he did not know about the code. He did not know that while he had been consumed with the custody fight, I had been quietly positioning myself to take everything he owned. I stepped out into the sunlight, and for the first time in weeks, the air tasted clean. The next morning brought no sense of peace. It brought a revelation of violence. We came out of the motel room still carrying the residue of yesterday's courtroom victory. That feeling dissolved the instant we stepped into the parking lot. The rental car, which I had left carefully under the one working street lamp, had been destroyed. It sat like a carcass picked over by scavengers. The windshield was crazed into 1,000 interlocking webs of safety glass. All 4 tires had been slashed, sagging flat against the asphalt, but it was the paint that twisted my stomach. Someone had dumped a bucket of thick red industrial paint across the hood and doors. In the raw morning light, it looked like pooled blood. I moved closer, my shoes grinding on the scattered glass. Scratched into the wet paint on the driver's side door were words that sent a cold current straight through me. Not a racial slur, though I might have expected that from a man like Clifton. something far more personal, far more vicious. The words read, "Next time it will be the twins." I stood there studying the threat. This was not the work of attorneys. This was not a legal tactic. This was a message from the gutter. Clifton Hargrove had grasped that he could not defeat us in a courtroom. So he had decided to break us in the street. He was threatening the lives of two 5-year-old boys to protect his bank account. A cold fury rose in my chest, the kind I had not felt since I was a young soldier moving through hostile territory. The rules of engagement had just shifted. We were no longer in a civil dispute. We were in a war zone. I reached for the door handle, stepping carefully around the paint to check the interior. On the driver's seat sat a brick. Wrapped around it was a photograph. A picture of Noah and Miles playing at the park, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. Their faces had been crossed out with black marker. I moved to pocket the photo before Andre could see it, but I was too late. He was right behind me. He saw the car. He saw the paint. He saw the photograph in my hand. Andre made a sound I will never forget. A high, thin wail of pure animal terror. He slid down against the trunk of the car until he hit the pavement, arms wrapped around his head, rocking. "They are going to kill them," he sobbed. "They are going to kill my babies. Dad, look at this. We cannot fight people like this. They are monsters. We have to give them back. We have to give them whatever they want." I looked down at my son. The man who had written code capable of transforming modern medicine was now a shaking heap on a parking lot. He was broken. The psychological warfare had done its work. Clifton wanted us terrified. He wanted us in full retreat. He wanted total surrender, and Andre was already reaching for the white flag. "We are leaving," Andre said, clawing his way back to his feet, eyes wild and unfocused. "We are packing right now. We are heading to Idaho, Montana, somewhere they will never find us. We will change our names. I will do construction work. I do not care. I just need my boys to be alive. Come on, Dad, move. We have to go before they come back." He grabbed my arm and pulled. His grip was frantic. He was not thinking. He was reacting the way prey reacts when it scents a predator. He was going to run. And in running, he would incinerate any future we had left. If we fled now, we would look guilty. We would look like kidnappers. The police would hunt us down, and this time, there would be nothing I could do to stop it. I planted my feet. I did not move. Andre pulled harder, his panic surging. "Dad, come on," he cried out. "What are you waiting for? They are going to kill us." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but beneath it I also saw the weakness that Brianna had spent years exploiting. She had conditioned him to be afraid. She had trained him to run. I understood that no words would reach him in this state. He was too deep in the panic for reason to land. I needed to break through to something underneath it. I needed to shock his system and reset him. I freed my arm from his grip. I stepped in close. I swung my hand. The slap connected with his cheek like a pistol shot. Hard, sharp, absolute. Andre's head snapped sideways. He stumbled back several steps, his hand rising instinctively to his face. The shock silenced the sobbing immediately. He stared at me, eyes wide with disbelief. I had never struck him in his life, not once. In our house, discipline had always been words, always reason. But reason does not penetrate hysteria. "Stand up straight," I said, my voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. Andre straightened up, still trembling, one hand pressed to his burning cheek. "Look at me," I said. He looked. The panic was still there, but it had frozen in place, suspended by the shock of what I had just done. "You are a black man in America?" I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. "Do you know what happens when we run? Do you know what happens when we behave like fugitives? We get shot. We get locked away. We get erased. Running does not save you, Andre. Running makes you a target." I pointed at the destroyed car. "Do you think driving to Idaho will save you?" I asked. "Do you think men like Clifton Hargrove stop at state lines? He has resources you cannot begin to imagine. If you run, you are doing precisely what he wants. You are proving that you are weak. You are proving that you are unstable. You are proving that you cannot protect your children." But they threatened the boys. Andre whispered, tears still leaking from his eyes, though slower now. "And they will keep threatening them for as long as you act like a victim," I said, raising my voice. "You are not a victim. You are a father. A father does not run when the wolf comes to the door. A father picks up a weapon and kills the wolf." I grabbed him by both shoulders and shook him. "I did not raise a coward," I said, looking straight into him. "I raised a genius. I raised a king. Stop carrying yourself like a servant who fears his master. They destroyed this car because they are scared, Andre. They are terrified. We beat them in that courtroom. We have the code. We have the truth. They are lashing out because they can feel themselves losing. And you are ready to hand them the victory over some paint and a brick. Andre looked at the car again. He looked at the red paint. He looked at the brick. He pulled in a long, jagged breath. He dragged his sleeve across his face. The wild, cornered look in his eyes began to cool into something harder. Not anger at me, anger at them. You hit me, he said quietly. I did, I said without apology. And I will do it again if you try to run off with my grandsons. I have fought too hard to keep you alive and out of a cell to watch you throw it all away because you are frightened. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. Make the decision, Andre. Are we running or are we fighting? Andre lowered his hand from his cheek. He stared at the blood-red paint on the door, his jaw set. We are fighting, he said. Good, I said. Then stop crying and start thinking. I turned away from him and looked out at the city skyline. The sun was fully up, burning through the last of the morning haze. The image of my grandsons' crossed-out faces was seared into my mind. I folded the photo and slid it into my pocket. I would keep it close. It would be the fuel for what I was about to do. We are done playing defense, I said, my voice back to calm, but cold as deep water. We have been reacting to every move they make. We defended in court. We defended against the police. We spent weeks protecting our reputation. That ends right now. You cannot win a war if you never fire a shot. What do we do? Andre asked, moving to stand beside me. His voice was level now. The shock had grounded him. Clifton believes his power lives in his name and his connections, I said. But he is wrong. His power comes from money. It comes from the valuation of that company. It comes from the investors who trust him. He is preparing to launch an IPO that would make him a billionaire. That IPO is his lifeline, and it is also his throat. I turned to face Andre. We are going to cut it, I said. We are going after Nathan Wexler, the CFO. I continued laying out the plan that had been taking shape in my mind. We are going to expose the rot at the core of their financial empire. We are not just going to reclaim the company, Andre. We are going to ensure that by the time we are finished, the name Hargrove is toxic. We are going to bankrupt them. We are going to leave them with nothing but their pride and their empty mansion. Andre studied me. He saw the cold calculation behind my eyes. He saw the soldier. How do we begin? He asked. I pulled out the burner phone. We begin with a phone call, I said. Every empire has a traitor inside it. We just have to find the one person Nathan Wexler betrayed the most. And I am fairly certain I already know who she is. I dialed the number. The line rang. I looked at the wrecked car one final time. They had sent a message written in violence. I was about to send one written in ruin. The time for mercy was over. The hour of destruction had arrived. I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the glass tower where Nathan Wexler worked. My hat was pulled low, and I wore a plain beige jacket that made me look like nothing more than a retiree working through the morning paper. On the table beside my black coffee sat a thick manila envelope. Inside were high-resolution prints of the photographs Virgil had taken Wexler and Brianna in the hotel lobby. Wexler and Brianna in the elevator. Wexler and Brianna sharing a bottle of champagne that cost more than my monthly mortgage. But the photographs were not the only thing in the envelope. I had included copies of the unauthorized wire transfers out of my son's company and into Wexler's personal offshore account in the Caymans. This was not just infidelity. It was embezzlement. I checked my watch. It was 9 in the morning. Carolyn Wexler would be arriving at her office at Wexler Media Group right about now. She was not simply a wronged wife. She was the daughter of a media tycoon, and she held a board seat on the very venture capital firm backing Clifton Hargrove. She was the linchpin. Pull her out, and the whole structure would detonate. I flagged down a bicycle courier I had spotted outside. Young kid tattoos climbing his neck, headphones draped around his ears. I handed him $50 cash and the envelope. Take this to the reception desk at Wexler Media, I said. Tell them it is personal correspondence for Mrs. Carolyn Wexler. Do not leave until you have confirmed it is in her hands. He nodded, shoved the bills into his pocket, and pushed off into the morning traffic. I watched him disappear. A strange stillness settled over me. I was not simply ending a marriage. I was dropping a tactical grenade into the center of their entire social world. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. Today it tasted like nectar. I did not wait around to watch the explosion. I walked back to the subway, folded myself into the crowd, a ghost moving through the machinery of the city. By the time I reached the motel, the package would be delivered. By noon, Nathan Wexler would wish he had never been born. We did not have to wait long. The story broke just after lunch. Andre was pacing the motel room, chewing his fingernails to nothing. He was afraid our move would backfire. He still believed Clifton was untouchable. But he had forgotten that, in the world of high finance, reputation is the only currency that actually holds its value. I switched on the small television sitting on the dresser. The financial news network was running a breaking story. The chyron at the bottom of the screen burned bright red. CFO of Pinnacle Capital ousted in scandal. The reporter stood in front of the Pinnacle building. Behind her security was walking Nathan Wexler out through the front doors. He was clutching a cardboard box, trying to hide his face with his jacket. Andre stopped pacing. He fixed his eyes on the screen. "Is that him?" he whispered. "That is him," I said. The reporter pressed on. Sources indicate that Carolyn Wexler, a majority shareholder, has filed for immediate divorce and called for an emergency audit of the firm's holdings, citing financial irregularities and serious conflicts of interest. The board has voted to suspend all pending acquisitions effective immediately, including the highly anticipated IPO of Neuropath Systems. Andre sat down on the edge of the bed as though his legs had simply quit. They suspended the IPO. He said, his voice hollow with disbelief. I nodded. Without Wexler shielding him, Clifton is exposed. Pinnacle Capital is pulling their money. They are not buying the company, and without that buyout, Clifton cannot cover the debts he took on leveraging this deal. The phone rang. It was Virgil. "Turn on Channel 4, Virgil said. I switched over. A local news crew was running live helicopter footage circling the Hargrove estate. The anchor was speaking with barely contained urgency. "We are receiving reports of a disturbance at the Hargrove residence. Police are on the scene. It appears creditors are attempting to seize assets on the property." Andre looked at me. "How did you know Carolyn would react this way?" he asked. "Because she is a businesswoman, Andre," I said. "A woman like her can absorb a mistake, but she will not tolerate being made to look like a fool. Wexler humiliated her with your wife. Now she is going to make certain neither of them ever works in this city again." The stock price of the holding company Clifton had created to absorb Andre's assets went into freefall. I watched the numbers crawl across the bottom of the screen. Red arrow after red arrow. A bloodbath. Every tick downward was another $1 million stripped from Clifton's net worth. The dominoes were toppling in exactly the sequence I had arranged them, but I knew Clifton. Arrogant, desperate, and a desperate man doesn't fold, he doubles down harder. The sun went down on a day of pure chaos, but the night brought a new threat. Virgil called me again at 10. His voice was wound tight. "Eugene, we have a problem," he said. "I've got a tap on Clifton's encrypted line. He's unraveling. He's on a conference call with Brianna right now." "What are they saying?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker so Andre could hear. "They're broke," Virgil said. "The bank called the loan on the mansion. They've got 48 hours to produce $5 million, or they lose everything. Wexler is gone, so they have no lifeline." "So, what's the play?" I asked. "They're selling the code," Virgil said. Andre shot to his feet. "They cannot sell the code," he shouted. "It's tied up in litigation." "They're not selling it through legal channels," Virgil continued. "They're on the dark web. They're negotiating with a buyer in Shenzhen, a company called Red Dragon. They're offering the complete source code, including the proprietary algorithms for a cash wire transfer. They're planning to smuggle the data out tonight." A cold chill moved through me. This was the mistake I'd been waiting for, but it was also a terrifying leap into something far darker. The algorithm wasn't just medical software. It was built on the Black Box project. It carried encryption keys the Department of Defense used to secure communication satellites. If that code crossed into China, it would be a national security breach of the highest order. "They're committing treason," I said, my voice dropping low. "They don't care," Virgil said. "They just want the money. They're setting up a secure server transfer for midnight. Eugene, if that transfer goes through, the code is gone forever, and your son goes to prison because his name is still on the patent. They'll pin the sale on him." I looked over at Andre. He'd gone white as a sheet. He understood exactly what was happening. Clifton was willing to burn the whole country down to save his own skin, and he was going to leave Andre standing in the ashes. "We have to stop the transfer," Andre said. reaching for his laptop. "I can try to get into their server. I can jam the connection." "No," I said, pressing his laptop lid shut. "We don't stop the transfer." Andre stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dad, are you serious? If that code leaves the country, I'm finished. I'll be branded a traitor." I stood and moved to the window, looking out over the city lights. "If we stop the transfer, they just try again," I said. "Different buyer, different night. We need to catch them in the act. We need them to actually push that button." "But the code," Andre protested. "We let them initiate the handshake," I explained. "We let them establish the connection to the Chinese server. That's proof of intent. That's conspiracy to commit espionage. But we cut the line before a single data packet clears the firewall." "And who exactly was going to cut the line?" Andre asked. I reached for my old flip phone, the emergency phone, the one with a single number stored in it, a number I hadn't dialed in 15 years. "I am," I said. I made the call. One ring. The line picked up. The voice on the other end sounded like gravel wrapped in authority. Director Parrish speaking. "Hello, David. I said this is Eugene Calloway. Black Box is active and we have a leak." A pause settled over the line. When the voice returned, it was different. No longer a bureaucrat. A hunter. "Give me the coordinates, Eugene." I checked the clock. It was 11. We had 1 hour. Clifton Hargrove thought he was closing a business deal. He had no idea he was stepping into a federal trap. I gave the director the IP address of Clifton's private server. I ended the call. "Pack your things, Andre," I said. "We're checking out." "Where are we headed?" Andre asked. "We're going to the police station," I said. "But not in handcuffs this time. We're walking in as witnesses to the largest corporate espionage bust this state has ever seen." Clifton and Brianna had just graduated from greedy relatives to enemies of the state. They thought they were selling software. What they were actually selling was their freedom. And I intended to be there when the receipt printed. The glow from the laptop screen was the only light in that motel room in a world that had gone completely dark. We were watching a crime happen in real time through the surveillance link Virgil had set up. On screen, Clifton Hargrove sat in his mahogany-paneled study. He looked like a man who was drowning and had decided to drag the whole ship down with him. His tie was loose sweat beading on his forehead under the hard light of his desk lamp. Brianna stood behind him, biting her lip so hard I thought it would split. They were both fixed on a secure terminal window, displaying a connection request from a server in Shenzhen. The buyer was Red Dragon. We knew them, a front for foreign intelligence operations specialists in acquiring dual-use technology. Clifton typed a command with shaking hands. The screen flashed green. Connection established. He wasn't just liquidating a company asset. He was cracking open a back door into the national security infrastructure of the United States. The medical AI code carried the ghost of Project Black Box, the adaptive encryption protocols I had designed to guard nuclear launch keys. Clifton didn't know that. He thought he was offloading a sophisticated diagnostic tool. He was too arrogant to grasp the weapon he was holding and too greedy to care where it landed. I watched the progress bar appear. Upload initializing 0%. "Do it," Brianna whispered over the audio feed, her voice shaking. "Just send it and get the wire. We can be in the Cayman Islands by morning." Clifton hesitated for half a heartbeat. It wasn't conscience that stalled his hand. It was fear. He knew that once he hit enter, there was no road back. He was crossing from white-collar criminal to traitor. He pressed the key. The progress bar jumped 5%, 10%. A physical sickness moved through my gut. I was watching my life's work, the code I had written to protect this country, being auctioned off to cover a mansion and a yacht. Andre sat beside me, his face drained of color. He grasped the technical stakes better than anyone. "They're using a packet masking protocol," Andre said, pointing at the screen. "They're disguising the data as a standard video stream to slip past the firewall. It's clever. It might fool the automated filters. It won't fool Parrish," I said, getting to my feet. I went to the window. The city below was asleep, with no idea that 2 people in a high-rise were selling its safety for cash. I dialed Director Parrish again. This wasn't a call for help. It was a tactical strike coordinate. "Director," I said, when the line connected, "the package is in transit. Target IP confirmed. They're running a UDP mask on port 8080. Through the line, I could hear the noise of a live operations center, voices barking orders, keyboards hammering. The FBI and the NSA were listening. I had handed them the head of the snake. Now they were ready to move. "We see it, Eugene." Parrish's voice was steady. the voice of someone holding the sword of Damocles. "We have a trace on the wire transfer. $50 million pending from a shell bank in Hong Kong. We're letting the data packets reach the relay server to confirm the content. Once we verify the encryption signature, we move. Verify fast." I said, my eyes locked on the screen as the progress bar hit 40%. If the transfer completes, they can replicate it. You need to kill the connection before it reaches 100. "We have a kill switch in place," Parrish assured me. "But, Eugene, there's something you need to know. Clifton is not using his own credentials for the transfer." I went still. I leaned in toward the motel room screen, zooming in on the terminal window Clifton was operating. My heart stopped cold. The username logged into the secure shell was not s.whitmore. It was diwa.robinson_admin. "He's using Andre's old credentials," I whispered. "He spoofed the login," Parrish confirmed. "As far as the digital record is concerned, your son is the one pushing those files out." Clifton had tunneled the connection through a VPN spoofed to mirror Andre's old laptop IP. A deliberate setup, a frame. I cut my eyes to Andre. He sat there watching the upload tick forward with no idea that his identity was being burned onto every packet of stolen data leaving that building. This wasn't improvised. Clifton had mapped it out in advance. He understood the stakes perfectly. A completed sale meant a fortune, but exposure meant prison. Either way, he needed someone to absorb the blast. And the most convenient target in the room was an unstable, bitter founder who just had his children taken away. "The man is a rat," I said, my voice cracking with fury. "He is setting my son up to take the fall." "Understood," Parrish replied. "But that digital trail is airtight on paper. If a judge ever sees those logs, it is Andre's name, Andre's fingerprints on the data, at least as far as the record shows. Then we need something physical. We need Clifton's actual hands on that keyboard on the record." "Make it happen," I said. "I'll deliver it. Hold your people back until I do." I ended the call. 60%. The bar kept climbing. The air in that room felt like concrete pressing on my chest, took me back to waiting underground for an abort signal that might never come. Then, without warning, Clifton went rigid at the screen. A call came in. He grabbed the phone. I couldn't make out a single word from the other end, but I watched his complexion go ash gray in real time. He drove the phone down onto the desk. "They know," he snarled at Brianna. The wire had been flagged. The bank froze the transfer and called it suspicious. Brianna's composure cracked immediately. "Suspicious? What are you talking about? That account is a shell. It should sail straight through. Someone inside tipped them off." Clifton was on his feet, moving in tight circuits like something caught in a snare, raking both hands back through his hair and wrecking his perfect coiffure. "The SEC just locked the account. The whole deal has collapsed." His eyes swung back to the monitor. 70%. Still running. "Kill it," Brianna snapped. "Shut it down right now. If that wire isn't landing, there is no reason to push the code." Clifton stretched his hand toward the keyboard, then his arm went still. Something shifted behind his eyes, a cold, reptilian calculation, replacing the panic. It was the face of a man who has just accepted he cannot rescue the prize and pivots entirely to rescuing himself. "No." The word came out barely above a murmur, stripped of everything but menace. "Let it run to the end." "Have you lost your mind?" Brianna grabbed his arm, fingers tight. "That code crosses the line and we both go down." "Not both of us." He peeled her hand off and stepped back. "Him." One finger jabbed at the screen at the username sitting there in plain text, dd.robinson_admin. "Think about it," he said, eyes moving fast, assembling the architecture of the lie. "I cancel now, it reads as a routine failed transfer, no story there. But if the upload completes and I'm the one who calls it in as a breach, I become the victim. I'm the executive who discovered the intrusion already in progress." He kept talking. "I tell them Andre accessed the system from an outside location, lifted the algorithms to punish us on his way out. Revenge play by a disgraced founder." His fingers were already moving, not to stop the transfer, but to erase his own login records and cement the false IP trail. He was pressing the murder weapon into Andre's hand while the wound was still bleeding. "I'm calling the bureau," Clifton announced, phone already in his grip. "Andre Calloway just committed corporate espionage against this company. I'm going on record saying we detected it and attempted to intervene, but he had already punched through our firewalls." My stomach dropped. He was dialing the same task force I had briefed hours ago. He was sprinting to plant his version first. He was going to wrap my son in the Patriot Act and present him as a national security threat, all to bury what he himself had done. Andre caught it, all of it, his own name on that screen, Clifton's thumb moving across the keypad. He is calling the authorities on me. Andre shot to his feet and stumbled backward from the laptop, voice splitting open. Dad, he is making me the suspect. They are going to take his word over mine. He is Clifton Hargrove. I am just the angry black man he fired. I will die inside a prison. I closed the distance and got both hands on his shoulders. Look at me, right now. My voice was measured, deliberate. He is charging straight into a trap, and he cannot see it. He thinks he is reaching out to the FBI Chicago field office. He thinks those agents owe him a favor. What he does not know is that Director Parrish has had eyes on every keystroke in that room, and the logs Andre managed. They still point at me. Logs are manufactured. They can be built and they can be torn apart. I turned back to the monitor. Clifton was so deep inside his scheme, he had gone completely blind to the physical world around him. He was hammering that keyboard. His prints were on every surface he had touched, keys, trackpad, the edge of the machine. And the one detail he had overlooked entirely, the laptop's camera, was live. I pushed a fast message to Virgil, pull the webcam feed. Now. A second window materialized on our screen. The internal camera aimed straight up, caught Clifton dead-on, eyes blown wide, jaw tight, fingers punching commands into the machine. Brianna hovered at his shoulder, pushing him forward. We've got him, I breathed. 90%. Clifton was deep into his phone call, now voice composed and righteous. Yes, this is Clifton Hargrove. I have an emergency. My former partner Andre Calloway has hacked our mainframe. He is stealing sensitive algorithms. I am watching the files leave the server right now. You need to arrest him immediately. Every syllable was a confession on a federal recording. He was narrating his own crime while the camera documented it frame by frame. 99. Then the bar flipped red. Transfer failed. Connection terminated by remote host. Parrish had pulled the plug. Clifton went motionless, staring at the words on the screen. His expression said he thought it had gone through. He believed Andre was already buried. He had no way of knowing the failure was engineered, that it was a door swinging closed around him, not a network hiccup. He lowered the phone, looked at Brianna, smiled. It is done. The Bureau is headed to pick up Andre now. All we have to do is look surprised when they pull up. I looked at Andre. He was shaking but upright. That was enough. Put your jacket on, I told him. Where are we going? He searched my face. Are we running from this? We are not running anywhere. I worked the buttons on my jacket and straightened my hat. We are driving to the Hargrove estate. He stared at me like the stress had finally broken something in my head. You want to walk into that? The FBI is rolling there right now. I know exactly where they're going, I said, and I intend to be standing on that driveway when they arrive. I want to be close enough to watch Clifton's face the moment he understands those restraints are meant for his wrists, not yours. I want him to see us on our feet when they put him on the ground. I lifted the repaired hard drive, original code documented chain of ownership, every layer of proof we had built. Truth is in our hands, I said, holding it up. Video evidence is on the server. Tonight the wolf does not eat the sheep. Tonight the sheep eats the wolf. We stepped out of the motel room. The night air hit cold and clean. Somewhere beyond the tree line, sirens were already singing, moving fast toward the hill, where the mansion sat dark against the sky. They sounded like justice closing in. I climbed behind the wheel of the rental and pulled out without a backward glance at the motel. That chapter was finished and sealed. We had spent weeks as the quarry. That ended now. The prey was sitting in his grand house, pouring himself something expensive, certain he was untouchable. We were coming to correct that impression. The wrought iron gates of the Hargrove estate came into view, and beyond them, Bedlam. Parrish hadn't sent a polite knock at the door. He had sent a declaration. 3 armored tactical vehicles sat nose to nose across the driveway. A helicopter chewed at the sky overhead, its beams sweeping the manicured grounds below. The strobes, blue and red, relentless, threw wild light across the white columns of the mansion until the whole structure pulsed like something on fire. Clifton Hargrove had positioned himself on the front porch in a silk dressing gown, arms animated, performing outrage and virtue for anyone watching. The moment our headlights swung through the gate, he pointed straight at us. "Ah, that is him!" he screamed, voice cracking against the noise of the rotors. "That is the one, the hacker, the traitor. Stop him before the evidence is gone. I brought the car to a stop. 6 agents in full tactical kit descended on us before I had the transmission in park. No introduction, no identification request doors wrenched open the night air flooding in. I lifted both hands slowly. Andre couldn't move. He sat locked in place, staring down the weapons trained on his face, looking at the man who had navigated him here to this precise moment and wondering if I had made a catastrophic mistake. Out of the vehicle, an agent seized Andre by the jacket collar and hauled him across the gravel. They wheeled him around, drove his legs apart with a boot. The cuffs clicked shut, sharp mechanical final. "Dad!" His voice was raw against the stones where his face was pressed. "Dad, what did you do? You told me we were going to fight. You drove me straight here to die." I was removed from the car with somewhat less force, but no less certainty. An agent worked me over with a pat-down, lifting my phone and the hard drive I'd left on the dashboard. I didn't fight it. I didn't turn toward Andre. I couldn't afford to. One look at his face and I would have cracked. And if I cracked, everything we'd built collapsed with me. Clifton came charging down the front steps, color high in his cheeks, radiating victory. "Thank God you're here," he gasped, performing breathlessly for the assembled agents. "He was trying to move the code to China. I did everything I could to stop him, but the man is not well. He hasn't touched his medication in weeks. Just look at him. He is completely unhinged." Andre was weeping now, fighting against the agent's grip. "I am not a traitor," he shouted. "Every word out of his mouth is a lie. My father knows what happened. Dad, tell them. Tell them what we found." I said nothing. I let the agent steer me toward a second vehicle. I watched the light go out of Andre's eyes from across the driveway. What moved in to replace it was something worse than fear. It was betrayal, pure total, and aimed directly at me. He was convinced I had bargained him away to spare myself. He thought I was one more frightened old man who would fold the moment the Hargrove name entered the room. They loaded him into the back of an armored van. As the heavy doors sealed shut, I caught him mouthing a single word at me through the window. "Coward." I rode in the back of a Bureau sedan while the city slid past the glass in streaks of amber and white. The agent up front glanced at me in the mirror. "You holding up Mr. Calloway?" "That one both distorted." I kept my eyes on the window. "I'm fine," I said. "Just get me to the room. I've got work left to do." The interrogation suite was exactly the kind of space I remembered from Pentagon briefing cinderblock walls under a coat of gray paint that made you feel guilty just sitting in it. A steel table anchored to the floor, and a two-way mirror throwing off that low electric hum that tells you a room full of people is standing 3 feet away, watching. Andre was already seated on the other side of the table. He'd been there an hour. They'd taken his shoelaces and his belt. He looked diminished, like something essential had been removed. Agent Braddock, lead investigator, Cyber Crimes Division, stood against the far wall. Sharp mind, sharper instincts with code than with people. He'd spent 40 minutes pressing Andre and gotten nothing back. Andre had simply fixed his eyes on the wall and waited for the cell he was certain was already reserved for him. The door swung open. I walked in. No handcuffs on my wrists. A visitor badge clipped to my chest read, "Department of Defense Consultant." I set a laptop and a thick file folder on the table. Andre looked up. He took in the badge. Then he looked at my face. "Dad," his voice was barely a sound. "What is happening? Did they charge you too?" I didn't answer. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. I opened the laptop. Agent Braddock moved to the table and positioned a recording device between us. For the record, Braddock said, "Present in this room are suspect Andre Calloway and Special Technical Advisor Eugene Calloway." Andre recoiled like he'd taken a hit. "Advisor?" The word came out strangled. "You are working alongside them. You are helping them bury me." I looked at my son. Every syllable landed like a closed fist, but I couldn't let that show. I had to stay in engineer mode. "Andre, focus on what I'm saying." My voice was flat calibrated. "We are reviewing the server logs from tonight's transaction. The Bureau has traced a $50 million wire transfer linked to a known front for Chinese intelligence. The login credentials used to authorize the file transfer belong to you. Your digital signature is on the packet." "So that's it?" Andre said, a single tear tracing his jaw. "You actually believe him. After everything we witnessed together, you are taking his side. You really are a coward." I typed a command. The screen behind me lit up with the transfer log's raw code projected large on the wall. "The evidence is substantial." I continued, not acknowledging the insult. "The IP address points to your old laptop. The username is yours. The password cleared on the first attempt. By any conventional forensic standard, this is a textbook corporate espionage case. Agent Braddock gave a slow nod. It is enough to put you away for 20 years, Andre, unless you want to cooperate and identify who you were working with. Andre let out a laugh with nothing warm inside it. I wasn't working with anyone. I was sitting in a motel room with the man I believed was my hero. Turns out he is just another person who sold me out. I stopped typing. I looked at Braddock. Standard forensics would convict him, I said. We are not running standard forensics today. I rotated the laptop so the screen faced Andre. Look at the code, I said. I have no interest in your fabrications, Andre shot back. Look at the code. I drove my palm down on the table. The crack of it filled the room. Look at the keystroke intervals. Andre flinched. His eyes went to the screen. He saw the timestamp data. I'd called up the milliseconds logged between each keystroke as the password was entered. You taught me this yourself, I said, pulling my voice down to something quieter. Every person carries a unique typing cadence. Keystroke dynamics, a biometric marker as individual as a fingerprint. Some people grip the shift key a fraction of a second too long. Some pause before a vowel. None of it is conscious. It lives in muscle memory. I brought up a second graph. 2 lines blue and red. The blue line is your cadence Andre compiled from the code you authored for your startup across the last 5 years. It is fast, rhythmic, and precise. You type like a pianist. I moved my finger to the red line, jagged, uneven lurching. This is the cadence of whoever entered your password tonight. Slower. Heavy on every key. And there's a consistent 300 millisecond pause before the enter key every single time. Andre studied the graph. Something in his expression shifted. That isn't me, he whispered. No, I said, it is not. I hit another key. A third graph appeared on top, tracing the red line with perfect fidelity. We pulled this sample from the subpoenaed correspondence of Clifton Hargrove, I said. 10 years of emails, memos, and internal messages. His typing pattern is a 99.9% match for the individual who initiated the illegal transfer tonight. Braddock leaned in over the data. A low whistle left him. He spoofed the IP, Braddock said, but he couldn't spoof his own nervous system. I looked at Andre. The realization was moving across his face in waves, fury, receding shock, rising to take its place. He framed himself, Andre said quietly. He did, I said. He believed he was only typing a password. He had no idea he was leaving a signature. I straightened and faced Braddock directly. The Department of Defense certifies this analysis as conclusive. The credentials were stolen. The transfer was executed by Clifton Hargrove. Andre Calloway is not a suspect in this matter. He is a victim of identity theft and a material witness to treason. Braddock picked up his radio. Control, this is Braddock. Forensic review is complete and confirmed. Primary target is Clifton Hargrove. Move on the warrant. I repeat, execute the warrant. I walked around the table. Braddock unlocked the cuffs. The metal clattered to the steel surface. Andre sat rubbing his wrists, looking up at me. For the first time since I'd walked into that room, he wasn't looking at the badge. He was looking at his father. You knew, he said, voice unsteady. You already knew in the car. I had to get you inside, I said quietly. I needed you in protective custody before Clifton understood that the transfer had been cut off. If we'd stayed out on the street, he would have dispatched mercenaries, not attorneys. I had to let you despise me for 1 hour to keep you safe for the rest of your life. Andre got to his feet. He wasn't steady. He pulled me in and buried his face against my shoulder, and I felt him shake. I'm sorry, Dad, he managed. I'm sorry I said what I said. I held on. I looked at the two-way mirror. I knew Parrish was on the other side of it. You were afraid, son, I said. Fear puts words in our mouths that don't belong there. But the fear is finished now. Braddock pulled the door open. Mr. Calloway, he said, addressing Andre. We have a helicopter standing by. We're returning to the estate. We need you to help us identify the hardware Clifton used before his legal team can get to it. Andre dried his face with the back of his hand. He looked at me. You coming? I smoothed my jacket. Wouldn't miss a minute of it, I said. We stepped out into the corridor. The whole floor was in motion. Agents suiting up, voices tight. The atmosphere completely transformed. They weren't chasing a low-level intruder anymore. They were moving to bring down a titan. And the man who had pointed them in the right direction wasn't a federal agent. He was a father who had turned his son's keyboard into a sword. We climbed to the roof. The helicopter rotors beat the air into submission. Down below, the city was stirring toward morning. Somewhere in it, Clifton Hargrove was pouring himself a drink, convinced the night had gone his way. He had no idea the sound descending from the sky wasn't a victory celebration. It was his reckoning arriving at 200 miles per hour. The tactical helicopter was deafening the airframe, shuddering with the raw authority of the federal government behind it. I sat beside Andre, who kept his gaze fixed on the dark land rolling beneath us. His hands were free, but he kept working his wrists where the cuffs had bitten his body, still processing how close the edge had been. We banked hard over the tree line, and the Hargrove estate materialized below. Every light on the property blazed. From 2,000 feet, it had the look of a fortress, old money insulated by generations of privilege. Then we dropped, and the illusion burned off instantly. The grounds were swarming. The armored convoy had punched straight through the iron gates, the same gates where Drucker had dressed me down only days before. The metal lay twisted in the gravel, torn clean from its hinges. Tactical teams moved in tight formation across the lawn, flashlight beams slicing the dark and clean lines. The sculpted hedges that Clifton guarded like sacred ground were being crushed under heavy boots. Over everything, Agent Braddock's voice boomed through a bullhorn and ricocheted off the stone face of the mansion. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for the arrest of Clifton Hargrove and Brianna Hargrove. Come out with your hands raised." We sat down on the far side of the lawn, the rotor wash kicking up a fury of dust and rose petals. I guided Andre out of the chopper. He stood looking at the house where he'd once believed he was raising a family and building a future. Now, it looked like a crime scene wearing a mansion's clothes. We crossed toward the chaos with agents flanking us on both sides. The household staff was already streaming out the side exits, cooks, groundskeepers, housekeepers, all of them moving fast and not looking back. They understood what federal vehicles on the driveway meant. The ship was going down, and none of them planned to drown with the captain. The front door stayed shut. Clifton was not the type to walk out with his hands up. He was a man who had spent his entire life operating from the conviction that the rules governing other people simply did not apply to him. Braddock signaled the breach team. They didn't knock. The battering ram hit the heavy oak door, Italian imported, custom-fitted, built to impress, and the wood exploded inward. Agents poured through the opening like a black tide, and I followed up the steps behind them, pulse slow and steady. This was what I had promised. This was the accounting. The foyer was a storm of shouting and motion. Teams cleared each room in sequence. I heard the crack of expensive vases meeting the floor. I heard paintings wrenched from walls as the search for hidden safes proceeded. The curated world of the Hargrove family was being taken apart room by room, shelf by shelf. We moved toward the main staircase. I knew where each of them would be. Clifton would be in the study, feeding documents into a shredder and buying himself seconds. Brianna would be somewhere else entirely doing what came naturally to her, working the room, even if the room was the entire internet. We found Brianna in the master bedroom. The door was locked. The agents put a boot through it. What we walked into made no sense at first. She wasn't throwing things into a bag. She wasn't on the phone with a lawyer. She was seated at her vanity, bathed in the flattering warmth of a ring light phone on a tripod in front of her. She was live streaming. I held up a hand to keep the agents back for a moment. I needed to see this. I needed to fully comprehend what we were dealing with. Brianna was crying, tears tracking carefully down her face, wrecking her makeup in a way that read as devastatingly photogenic rather than ugly. Her voice, when she spoke into the camera, carried a tremor so precisely calibrated it could have won an award. "Guys, I don't know what's happening," she sobbed to her 2 million followers. "Andre has sent people after us. He has lost his mind completely. He broke into our company's systems, and now there are armed men outside my home. I am so scared. Please, if anyone is watching, call the police. We are innocent. We only ever tried to protect our children." Right to the bitter end, she was playing the victim, using her audience as armor against what was coming through her door. She glanced at the viewer count. It was climbing. Comments cascaded up the screen, prayers, expressions of support, people who believed every syllable. She thought she could still win in the court of public opinion, even with a federal warrant in hand. Agent Braddock stepped into the frame. Brianna Hargrove put the phone down. He said, his voice cutting straight through her performance. Brianna screamed, theatrical design for the lens, calibrated for maximum sympathy. "They're here!" she shrieked, pivoting to face the camera. "Oh my God, they're going to kill me." Braddock didn't pause. He crossed the room, closed a hand around her arm, and pulled her away from the vanity. Brianna fought, nails, elbows, everything she had. Get your hands off me! The polished facade cracked, and the real voice came through. Do you have any idea who I am? My father will destroy your career. Braddock wheeled her around and pressed her against the wall. The phone had tumbled onto the carpet during the struggle, but the camera was still live lens angled upward, catching everything. It caught the shock registering on her face as the handcuffs clicked into place. It caught the silk robe tearing at the shoulder as she twisted against the agents, and it captured clearly, unmistakably, the words being read aloud over her. Brianna Hargrove, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit treason. The live chat detonated. The prayers stopped. The questions erupted. Treason. Fraud. The millions of people she had spent years cultivating watched the truth land on her in real time. I stepped into the room. I picked up the phone from the carpet. Brianna looked up and found me holding it, and every bit of color left her face. Eugene, she breathed. Tell them this is wrong. Tell them they've made a mistake. I looked at the screen. I looked at the comments still scrolling past, people putting it together, watching the villain materialize where they'd only seen a victim. The mask was gone. And I no mistake, Brianna, I said, and looked straight into the camera. I ended the stream. The screen went dark. The quiet that followed had weight. Brianna sank back against the wall, and the crying that came now was nothing like what she'd performed for the camera. She looked past me to the doorway where Andre was standing. Her voice went soft and desperate. Andre, baby, please, help me. I did everything for us. Andre looked at her. He looked at the woman who had poisoned his children's lives and stripped away years he would never recover. He didn't offer a single word. He turned around and walked out. That silence did more damage than anything he could have said. It was the sound of a man excising something that had been killing him slowly. We left Brianna with the agents and made our way to the study. The noise coming from inside was of a different character entirely. Clifton was not weeping. He was detonating. We pushed through the door and found him cornered behind the massive desk, a stack of files clutched against his chest, like they were body armor. 3 agents had weapons leveled at him. Don't you touch me? His face had gone a deep mottled purple. This is private property. I want the Attorney General on the phone right now. I had dinner with him last week. Braddock took a step forward. The Attorney General signed the warrant, Mr. Hargrove, set the files down. Clifton hurled the files at the nearest agent. Papers erupted across the room and drifted to the floor. Then his hand went into the desk drawer. Every agent in the room went rigid, fingers tightening. Drop it! Braddock's voice cracked like a gunshot. Clifton's hand came back out. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a checkbook. How much? He screamed, brandishing it wildly. Name your number. 1 million. 2 million. I'll write it this instant, cash, no trail. Just walk out of here and leave the boy to answer for this. We'll say it was him. He was attempting to purchase the FBI. He was so completely severed from reality that he genuinely believed federal agents operated the same way as the zoning board members he kept on retainer. Braddock reholstered his weapon and produced his handcuffs instead. Bribery of a federal officer, he said evenly. Add it to the charges. 2 agents moved on Clifton simultaneously. He didn't go quietly. He kicked, he spit, he clawed, every trace of the polished industry titan stripped away, leaving something cornered and feral underneath. They dragged him around the desk and drove him to his knees. When they hauled him upright, his eyes found me. I was standing beside the bookshelf, hat in my hands, watching him with the quiet attention of a man watching a machine run its last cycle. You, Clifton hissed, blood on his lip, blood on the carpet beneath him. You dirty son of a... The word went unspeakable. You did this. You have destroyed everything I built. I said nothing. There was nothing that needed saying. You are nothing, he screamed as they hauled him toward the door. A mechanic, a servant. You think you've beaten me? I'll purchase the jury. I'll own the judge. You will never see a single dime, and I will grind you into nothing. He unleashed a torrent of racial slurs, then words he had kept neatly concealed behind country club manners and boardroom handshakes for decades now pouring out of him without restraint. He exhausted every slur he knew. In doing so, he showed the room and everyone in it exactly what lived beneath the polished surface. Andre stepped forward, fists tight at his sides, ready to answer for me. I pressed a hand to his chest. Let him keep talking, I said quietly. I walked up to Clifton. The agents gave me the space. Clifton was heaving for breath, face-drenched eyes practically vibrating out of his skull. I looked him over, head to foot, unhurried. I reached up and set the brim of my hat straight. I brushed a phantom speck from my lapel. Then I met his eyes and gave him a small, courteous nod, the kind you'd give a stranger who held a door. Then I turned my back on him. "Get him out," Braddock said. Clifton's screaming chased him down the hallway, bouncing off marble and crown molding, growing thinner with each step, until the heavy front door swung shut and swallowed him entirely mid-sentence. The mansion went quiet. Agents moved through the rooms, tagging and bagging. The operation was winding down. The empire of Hargrove Capital, which had seemed as permanent as bedrock 72 hours ago, had been reduced to evidence boxes and case numbers. Andre drifted over to the desk. He looked down at the papers carpeting the floor. He picked up a framed photograph from the IPO announcement and held it for a moment, then dropped it into the wastebasket. "It's done, Dad," he said. His voice was wrung out. "Almost," I said, moving toward the computer. The hard drive carrying the original code was still seated in the port. I pulled it free and tucked it into my pocket. "Now it's done." We descended the grand staircase and walked out through the open front door into a night that had turned cool and clean. We moved past the flattened hedges, past the wrought iron gates bent back in the dirt, past the police vehicles where Clifton and Brianna sat in separate caged compartments, watching everything they had built get cataloged and carried away. I didn't spare them a glance. I looked up. The sky was full of stars. A night like that feels like a door opening. We got into the car and drove out through the gates, leaving the wreckage of the castle at our backs. We had walked into the fire together, and we had come out carrying the one thing that couldn't be seized or subpoenaed each other. The Metropolitan Correctional Center Chicago was a gray concrete structure that reeked of industrial disinfectant and the particular despair of places built to contain rather than correct. It was designed to pare a human being down to pure biological fact. I settled onto a metal stool bolted to the floor of the visitation booth. The glass in front of me was thick and scratched the accumulated record of thousands of heartbreak visits that had come before this one. I checked my watch. 2:00 in the afternoon. Outside, the sun was working. In here, there was only the drone of fluorescent tubes and the deep mechanical clang of automated doors cycling open and shut. I wasn't here to savor anything. I was here to close the final ledger of a war that Brianna Hargrove had started. The door on the far side of the glass buzzed and came open. A guard entered, followed by a woman in an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too large for her frame. I nearly didn't place her. The Brianna I knew was a creature of engineered presentation, a woman who wouldn't cross her own bedroom without an hour of groundwork behind her. The person who lowered herself into the chair across from me was someone else entirely. The blonde hair she used to toss with such practiced arrogance was scraped back into a greasy, severe bun. The dark roots pushed up harsh and uneven against the dyed lengths. Her skin, stripped of the layers of expensive foundation she used like a second face, was pale and uneven. The hollows beneath her eyes were deep, the kind that come from sleepless nights spent in the grip of what you've done and where you are. She lifted the receiver. Her hand shook. I noticed her fingers. The manicured nails had been chewed to the quick. She looked at me, and for a flicker, I caught the old defiance, but her circumstances extinguished it almost immediately. She looked diminished. She looked exactly like what she was. "Eugene," she said, voice thin and distorted through the line. "I knew you'd come. Thank you for being here. You are a good man. You always were a man of God." I picked up my receiver and said nothing. I just held her in my gaze. I wanted her to sit inside the silence. I wanted her to feel what it was to be looked at by a man she had spent years calling a servant. "I know how this must appear." She continued, shifting forward, her breath misting the glass. "It looks terrible, I understand that. But you have to hear what it was actually like. I was afraid. My father pressured me into everything. Eugene, you saw how Clifton operates. He controlled every room he walked into. I had no real choices in that house. I was a victim of his, the same as Andre. If I had refused him, he would have cut me off completely. Even in an orange jumpsuit sitting inside a federal detention facility, she was constructing a narrative, still spinning, still working the room. She drew a finger across her cheek. In a different setting, that gesture would have disarmed a jury. "I think about the boys constantly," she said, voice dropping to a soft, practiced tremor. "I can't sleep. How are they? Are they eating properly? Does Miles still have his teddy bear? Please just tell me they're all right." I leaned in close and studied her eyes carefully. I was looking for something real in there, some actual maternal feeling. What I found was arithmetic. She was deploying the children the way she always had, as leverage. "Oh, the boys are fine, Brianna," I said, my voice even and uninflected. "Better than fine, actually. For the first time in their lives, they sleep through the night without listening to you tear their father apart in the next room. They eat full meals now without someone threatening consequences over a spilled drink on a white carpet." Brianna pulled back as if I'd reached through the glass. "Eugene, please," she said quickly. "I made mistakes, I know that. I was under enormous stress, but I am still their mother. You cannot simply remove me from their lives. I have legal rights." "You had rights," I said, and pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket. I held it flat against the glass so she could read the heading clearly. "Andre was granted full sole and permanent custody this morning," I said. "Judge Tremont reviewed the video evidence. He reviewed testimony from the nannies you dismissed. He reviewed the psychological evaluations of both twins. You have been formally designated a threat to their physical and emotional welfare. Your parental rights have been terminated." Brianna stared at the paper. Her mouth worked open and shut, processing what she was reading. The ground was gone beneath her feet. "You will never see them again," I continued. "You will never speak to them again. As far as Noah and Miles are concerned, their mother went away and she is not coming back. We are removing you from their story, Brianna, the same way you tried to erase Andre from his own." "No," she drove her palm against the glass. "You cannot do this. They are my children. I'll fight it. My attorney will overturn this." "Your attorney withdrew this morning," I said. "His firm doesn't take clients facing treason charges. And even if he'd stayed, you can no longer pay him." Brianna sank back in her chair. Her eyes moved around the small room like she was searching for a way out that wasn't there. "Eugene, listen to me." She dropped her voice and shot a glance at the guard posted by the door. "I have information. I know where Clifton concealed the secondary accounts. I know exactly how the offshore shells in Panama are structured. I can give full testimony against him. I can hand you everything. Just speak to the prosecutor, get me a deal. I cannot survive this place. The women in here look at me like I am something to be consumed. I will not make it." She was prepared to hand her own father to the government to buy herself daylight. Not shocking. In the Hargrove family, loyalty was always a tradable commodity, and the market had crashed. "We don't need anything you're carrying," I said, keeping my voice cold and level. "We have the hard drive. We have the server logs. We have the recorded video of the transfer itself. There is more than enough to bury Clifton for multiple lifetimes. Your testimony adds nothing. You are not a witness, Brianna. You are a co-conspirator." "But I am family." She pleaded, tears now moving freely down her face. "I am the mother of your grandchildren. I am your daughter-in-law." "You stopped being family," I said, "the day you stood by while your father framed my son for a crime that would have put him away for decades. You stopped being family the day you threw my grandson's belongings in the trash. You are not family. You are inmate number 894. Oh, that's the only thing you are now." I began to lower the receiver. "Wait," her voice fractured. "Wait, Eugene, the estate my things. I need funds for the commissary. I need to liquidate the property. The deed is in my name too. I can sell it and pay restitution. And I can get a better lawyer." I paused. I brought the receiver back to my ear. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the final twist of the knife. "You do not have a house, Brianna," I said. "What do you mean?" she asked, wiping her nose. "The bank has not foreclosed yet. It takes months. The bank called the note yesterday," I explained. "When the scandal broke into the open, the property's value collapsed overnight. The bank wanted that toxic debt off its books immediately. They put the mortgage note up for a private emergency sale." "So, who bought it?" she asked, her eyes shifting back and forth. "I did," I said. Brianna froze. She stared at me as though I were speaking in a language she had never heard. "You," she whispered, "you do not have that kind of money." "I did not," I admitted. "But then I made a few calls. I used the settlement money from the defamation lawsuit against your father, which his insurance company paid out yesterday, and combined it with the signing bonus from the new government contract that Andre had just locked in for his company. We bought the debt for pennies on the dollar, Brianna. I am the holder of the note. I am your creditor." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that hit harder than a shout. "And this morning, as the new owner of that debt, I exercised my right to immediate foreclosure based on criminal activity on the premises. The deed has been transferred. The locks have been changed." Brianna looked horrified. "My clothes," she stammered. My jewelry, my bag seized, I said. Every item inside that house is now considered abandoned property applied against the outstanding debt. We are auctioning all of it. Every dollar goes to a charity for children of incarcerated parents. She shook her head violently. No, she moaned. No, this cannot be real. This is a nightmare. It is not a nightmare, I said, rising to my feet. It is justice. You took my son's home. You took his car. You stripped away his dignity. You mistook our silence for weakness. You assumed that because we were black, we were without resources. Now, I own your house. I own your debt. And I own your future. I looked down at her one final time. She was weeping into her hands, a shattered woman, in an orange suit, with nothing remaining in this world but the weight of her own greed. Goodbye, Brianna, I said. I hung up the phone. The click was absolute. I turned and walked toward the exit. I did not look back. I could hear her screaming my name through the thick glass, but it reached me the way a ghost's cry reaches the living in a storm. It did not touch me. I walked out of the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Chicago, into the sharp brightness of the afternoon. Andre was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a new SUV. He looked healthy. He looked free. He read my face the moment he saw it. Is it done? He asked. It is done, I said. We got in the car. Where to? Andre asked. Home, I said. And for the first time in a very long while, that word carried real weight. It was not a place of fear or buried secrets. It was a fortress we had raised with our own hands from the ashes of everyone who had tried to bring us down. We drove away, leaving the prison behind, leaving the Hargroves to rot in the cells they had constructed for themselves. We had won, and the silence that settled in the car afterward was the most beautiful sound in the world. 6 months had passed since those flashing lights faded from the driveway, and the sirens stopped bouncing off the estate's stone walls. The seasons had shifted the manicured green lawns, giving way to a tapestry of autumn gold and rust. I drove my truck up the long, winding driveway, but this time there was no parking on the shoulder, no waiting for Drucker to buzz me in with that look of pity in his eyes. I had the remote. I pressed the button, and the new iron gate swung open without a sound, welcoming me home. This was no longer the Hargrove estate. The brass plaque on the front pillar that had carried their name for 3 generations was gone. In its place was nothing, just clean stone. We did not need a sign to announce who we were. We already knew. We were the Callaways, and we had taken the castle not through inheritance, but through conquest. I parked in front of the garage. Andre was already there, standing on the porch. He carried himself differently now. The hunch that had lived in his shoulders was gone, replaced by the easy, grounded posture of a man who owns the earth beneath his feet. He was watching Noah and Miles tear through the piles of leaves scattered across the lawn. Their laughter was wide open and unrestrained, a sound that had been unwelcome in this house for far too long. They were dirty, they were loud, they were happy. We spent that afternoon doing something that would have given Clifton a heart attack. We were cleaning house, but not with mops and brooms. We were using fire. We had gathered the last remnants of the Hargrove rain. In the center of the backyard, where Clifton used to stage his pretentious garden parties, we had built a fire pit. Beside it sat a pile of boxes. Inside were the things we could not sell and had no desire to keep. Brianna's designer furs, the portrait of Clifton that had dominated the library wall, bearing down on every visitor with a look of cold judgment. The silk drapes from the master bedroom that had always choked out the light. Andre picked up a fur coat. It was white and heavy, the kind of thing purchased to project dominance rather than provide warmth. He turned it over in his hands for a moment. I thought he might waver. I thought some trace of the woman he had once loved might pull at him. But then his eyes found his son's tumbling through the leaves, and whatever nostalgia had flickered simply vanished. He threw the coat into the flames. We watched it burn. The fire curled through the expensive fabric, turning vanity into ash. It was a ritual. We were not simply burning objects. We were burning the memory of abuse. We were burning the silence that had suffocated this family for years. We did not donate these things. You do not donate poison. You destroy it so it can never reach anyone else. One by one, the relics of our oppression rose into the smoke. That smoke climbed into the cool evening air and carried away the ghost of Brianna and the long shadow of Clifton. When the fire finally burned down to glowing embers, I felt a lightness in my chest that I had not known in years. The house behind us looked transformed. The windows stood open, drawing in the breeze. The lights inside were warm. It was no longer a museum of greed. It was a home. The following morning, I went to the headquarters of Callaway Systems. It occupied the same glass tower where Andre had once been, marched out by security, but now he held the entire top floor. I walked into the conference room and settled into a seat near the back. I was technically the chairman of the board, but I have always preferred the shadows. I prefer to watch. Andre stood at the head of the long mahogany table, addressing a room full of new investors. These were not the predators from Pinnacle Capital. These were serious people engineers and visionaries who cared about the technology itself, not just the stock price. Andre wore a suit that fit him as though it had been made for him alone, but it was his voice that owned the room. He laid out the new Neuropath medical AI protocols. He explained precisely how the code would preserve lives in rural hospitals. He fielded every question with authority and precision. No stutter, no eyes dropping to his hands. He held eye contact. He controlled the conversation's rhythm. When a skeptical investor pressed him on data security, Andre smiled. It was the kind of smile that reminded me of my own father. The security is built on a black box architecture, Andre said. It was designed by the best engineer I know, and it has been tested under fire. He looked over at me, then a silent acknowledgement crossing between us. He was speaking about the code, but he was also speaking about the war we had waged to protect it. The investors nodded, visibly impressed. They had no idea what blood and sacrifice had gone into those lines of code. They saw only a brilliant CEO steering a cutting-edge company. After the meeting, we sat together in his office overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking. From up there, the parking lot where I had found him, sleeping in a rusted green Chevy Malibu, felt like it belonged to another world entirely. Like a bad dream from a lifetime neither of us lived in anymore. "You did good today, son," I said, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Andre took the cup. He crossed to the window and stood looking out. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," he admitted, his voice low. "I keep waiting for a knock at the door, or for Brianna to post something on social media." "She will not," I said. "She is serving 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary, and Clifton is facing 20. They are gone, Andre. The only thing knocking on your door from here on out is opportunity." Andre turned from the window. He set his coffee down and came toward me. He hesitated for just a beat, then pulled me into a hug. It was nothing like the desperate clinging embrace of the boy in the interrogation room. This was the firm, grounded hold of a man hugging his father. "You saved my life," he said. "Not just the company, you saved me. When you slapped me in that parking lot, I hated you for it. I wanted to hit you back, but it snapped me awake. It forced me to see that I was already gone and that I had to claw my way back." I patted his back, feeling the solid muscle beneath his jacket. "I did not save you," I said, stepping back to meet his eyes. "I just reminded you of who you already were. You are a Callaway. We do not break, we bend. We bleed, but we never break." We left the office and drove back to the house for dinner. The boys were already seated at the table waiting. The nanny, a warm woman named Mrs. Patton, had made beef stew. Simple food, real food. We sat down, and for the first time in years, we said grace without rushing through it. We held hands around the table. I felt the small, sticky grip of Miles in mine, and the steady strength of Andre's hand on the other side. The conversation carried nothing about stock prices or courtrooms. It was about school, soccer practice, the new Spider-Man movie, the ordinary, beautiful talk of a family that had found its way back to itself. And that ordinary was the greatest victory of all. We had walked through fire to reach this dinner table. We had faced treason and betrayal, and the inside of prison cells just to sit here and eat beef stew in peace. Later that night, I settled into the rocking chair on the front porch. The house had gone quiet. The boys were asleep. Andre was reading in the study. I looked up at the stars. I turned the journey over in my mind. I thought about the $500,000 that had set everything in motion. It felt like such a trivial sum now. The true cost had been something else entirely. We had lost our innocence. We had learned that the people who grin at you can have a knife tucked behind their back. We had learned that the legal system is a weapon, one the wicked can pick up just as readily as the righteous. But there was something else we had learned. We had learned the power of truth. Not the polished, comfortable kind that gets spoken at dinner parties, but the raw, unvarnished truth that cuts through deception like a blade. We had learned that a father's love is not a quiet thing. It is active. It is dangerous. It is a force of nature that will set the world ablaze to protect what is its own. People ask me sometimes whether I carry any guilt over what happened to the Hargroves. They ask whether buying their debt and claiming their home crossed a line, whether I should have shown mercy. I take a sip of my bourbon and I give them the same answer every time. Justice is not vengeance. Vengeance is emotional, uncontrolled. Justice is mathematical. It is the settling of an equation. Clifton and Brianna took everything from us. They tried to steal my son's mind and my grandson's future. They carved humanity out of our lives like it was theirs to take. I simply balanced the ledger. I returned the deficit to where it originated. I do not feel guilt. I feel peace. When I look at this house, I do not see a war trophy. I see a fortress. I see a sanctuary where my grandsons will grow up standing tall and proud. They will know that their grandfather was a soldier. They will know that their father is a king. And they will know that in this family, we do not run from monsters. We turn on the lights and watch them scatter. My name is Eugene Calloway. I am 68 years old. I am a retired engineer. I am a father, and I am the man who stood in a parking lot and refused to let the darkness take us. If you are facing a giant right now, do not be afraid. Giants are just tall. They fall harder when you take them off at the knees. Stand your ground. If you have stayed with me this far, then you already understand what this journey was really about. It was never just about a house or a company or a courtroom. It was about a father who refused to let his family disappear. This road cost more than I can put into words. It cost sleep certainty and a version of innocence that does not come back once it is gone. What it gave back was something harder and more permanent. The knowledge that truth, when you are patient enough to carry it, will eventually find its moment. I believe God placed that hard drive in a garbage pile for a reason. The Lord's timing is never convenient, but it is always exact. For every adult navigating something like this, every person in the adult's 50-plus season of life who has been told to sit down and stay quiet while someone dismantles what they built, this family revenge story is for you. You are not too old. You are not too slow. You are seasoned. Here is what I would want you to hold on to. Document everything. The moment something feels wrong, start your record quietly, carefully, and without warning anyone. Never confuse silence with surrender. Staying quiet while you gather your strength is not weakness. It is strategy. If someone uses the law against you, learn the law. It belongs to you just as much as it belongs to them. And when it is over, burn what needs burning. Do not carry the weight of people who never deserved your loyalty. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment and tell me what hit you hardest. And if you are not yet subscribed to Honor Revenge Stories, I hope you will stay. There are more stories here waiting for you. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself out there.